Chapter 707. Yunnan Tian ignored Yan Ji and turned to Feng Xiangtian with a smile. So you're Huaxia cultivators, please go ahead. He didn't introduce himself and everyone else, as he didn't want to waste time talking. After all, the difference in cultivation was too big. The so-called supporting Immortal Island sect leader wasn't even worth mentioning in his eyes. But then again, with his identity, he was already very cultured to speak so politely to Feng Xiangtian. Although he didn't say everyone's identity, Feng Xiangtian and the others already knew. Especially when the two of them were arguing just now, Yunnan Tian and Yan Ji's names made the Huaxia cultivators' hearts jump. These were the names of the soul formation realm lords of the various countries. Then I won't disturb you all. Feng Xiangtian didn't dare to show any temper. He cupped his hands at Yunnan Tian and the others respectfully. He led the group of people and turned, wanting to go around these terrifying people. The various countries' lords looked at these Huaxia cultivators who were trembling like chickens and sneered. It wasn't convenient to touch them now, but once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, these people would undoubtedly be lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They wouldn't be able to run even if they wanted to. Hua Zongming, who was holding Yan Ji, looked at the Huaxia cultivators floating away in front of him expressionlessly. However, his eyes suddenly lit up. He saw that there were several women standing on one of the flying artifacts. One of them was a woman dressed in white. She was a rare beauty in this world. He couldn't help but shout, "Stop!" The various countries' lords all looked at Hua Zongming. Yan Ji, who was beside him, was even more confused. This guy told him that now wasn't the time to cause trouble, so why did he start again? The Huaxia cultivators all stopped in fear. The leading flying artifact from supporting Immortal Island floated back. Feng Xiangtian braced himself and asked Hua Zongming, "May I know what advice this senior has for us?" He had no choice but to stand up for Hua Zongming. After all, he was the sect master of the number 1 sect. Hua Zongming, who was wearing light yellow thin clothes and barefooted, waved his hand in an elegant manner and said, "It's none of your business." His eyes were fixed on the beautiful woman in the crowd. Everyone followed his gaze and suddenly came to a realization. He must have seen a stunning beauty. No wonder. It must be known that Hua Zongming was a person who was famous for his love for beauties. His Great Light Palace was called a den of lust behind his back because he kept many beautiful women. It wasn't hard to guess what he liked by looking at his clothes that didn't fit his style. In fact, it wasn't just Hua Zongming. Many people's eyes lit up when they saw that woman. That woman was none other than the leader of the Moon Clan, Chonghua Fairy. She was famous for her looks in the cultivation world of Huaxia. This was also because Bai Hua Fairy wasn't here, otherwise a pair of beauties would definitely be a feast for the eyes. Jade Flower Fairy's expression changed slightly. She naturally noticed Hua Zongming's lecherous gaze, and he was not the only one. Although she was angry, she was even more terrified because she couldn't afford to offend anyone here. He could only tilt his head to the side and pretend that he didn't see anything. The reason why the Huaxia cultivators were here was naturally because they heard that Bai Changchun was going to the Eastern Holy Land. Therefore, the leaders of the various sects contacted each other and came together to see him off, to thank Bai Changchun for protecting the Huaxia cultivation world for so many years. Of course, this was just a nice thing to say. The main reason was that every torture master of the Ghost region was a top expert who could shake the cultivation world. The next torture master would probably be no worse. The hundreds of sect leaders had come here and put on such a grand show because they wanted to show respect to Senior Bai. Or rather, they wanted to play the pity card, hoping that Senior Bai could speak to the next enforcer and continue to protect the world of cultivators in Huaxia. According to their thinking, since Bai Changchun could take care of the Huaxia cultivation world for so many years, it was obvious that he had deep feelings for the Huaxia cultivation world. They believed that if they came together to beg him, he wouldn't really ignore them. Therefore, this scene happened. However, their thinking was just wishful thinking. Bai Changchun didn't take care of the Huaxia cultivation world like they thought. First of all, when they saw Bai Changchun later, it was still uncertain whether he would talk to them or not. Second, once Bai Changchun left, it would be difficult for them to leave this place safely. Jade Flower Fairy had just turned her head to one side when a white figure suddenly appeared in front of her. She was a little surprised, but then she saw clearly who it was. It was the elegant man in a fluffy white robe who talked to Feng Xiangtian just now. He was looking at her deeply. Jade Flower Fairy was suddenly at a loss. She couldn't scold him, let alone beat him. Sorry to disturb you, Fairy. Yunantian bowed politely and said, I am Yunantian, the Lord of Lu Nangua. It is my honor to meet you today. I wonder if I have the honor to know your name. Jade Flower Fairy bit her lips and bowed. I am Jade Flower, the leader of the Moon Clan. Nice to meet you, Senior. Hua Zhongming's face darkened. He didn't expect that Yunantian would take advantage of him after he stopped these people. Among the lords, many people were already snickering. They all knew that Yunantian was not a good guy. There was a reason why he only accepted female disciples in his clan. Those who knew the truth all knew that the relationship between Yunantian and the female disciples he accepted was not clear. It was just that, apart from cultivators at the last stage of the semi-god realm, Yunantian's cultivation was considered high compared to the other lords. Everyone gave him some face and few people talked nonsense. Haha. Yunantian really doesn't change. Pei Fong smiled at Qi Zhejuan and Ouyangde, who were beside him. He then shouted loudly, Brother Yu, calm down for the time being. If there is anything, we can talk about it later. Please come over and have a chat. He did not want Yunantian to cause any trouble now, lest everyone was implicated. Yunantian glanced at Pei Fong and bowed to Jade Flower Fairy. Oh, the famous Jade Flower Fairy. Nice to meet you. I will talk to you again when I have the chance. After that, he stepped back and teleported to the flying ritual implement where Pei Fong was. He glared at Pei Fong and said grumpily, What's the matter? Pei Fong shouted to the people of the Huaxia cultivation world, Let's go. Don't make trouble for yourselves. As soon as he spoke, no one stopped the Huaxia cultivators. A group of people quickly flew away. At this time, Pei Fong turned to Yunantian and said with a smile, Brother Yu, in terms of appearance, who in the world can compare to Lu Yanqing? As soon as these words came out, many people couldn't help but burst into laughter. Everyone knew that Yunantian had once pursued Lu Yanqing. Unfortunately, he was beaten up by his rival in love, Wen Lanfeng, and almost lost his life. From then on, Yunantian didn't dare to provoke Lu Yanqing anymore. Pei Fong was obviously exposing his shortcomings. Yunantian snorted coldly and flashed back to his original position. At this moment, everyone's laughter stopped abruptly and they looked around. The whistling sound of the wind gradually became louder, and the blowing sea breeze suddenly became stronger. The strange thing was that this wind wasn't from the north, south, east, or west. It was a little messy, and it became more and more vigorous. When it blew on their faces, it felt like something was slapping their faces. The blue sea below lost its rhythm and gradually became turbulent. Just as everyone was looking at each other in dismay, they suddenly heard the faint rumbling of thunder coming from all around them. Everyone quickly looked around and saw dark clouds coming from the horizon. They came from all directions and seemed to be gathering in this direction. Under the dark clouds, ferocious thunderbolts, dragons, snakes, and flood dragons were shining brightly. They connected the sea and the dark clouds in the sky and were moving quickly. The wind became stronger and was close to a storm. The sea was completely angry and set off monstrous waves. The East Holy Land is about to open. Pei Fong said with a smile on his face. What he meant was that Bai Changchun was finally leaving. Ouyangda and Qi Zhejuan nodded slightly. Many people present had seen the opening of the East Holy Land. They all understood that this was a sign of the opening of the East Holy Land. However, none of the Huaxia cultivators had seen it before. Just as they were dozens of miles away from the feudal lords, they suddenly saw such a change in the sky and sea. All of them looked around in bewilderment. The fog that had just shrouded Xian Island was blown away again. Bai Changchun, who was standing on the peak of the mountain, slowly opened his eyes and looked around with radiance. Nongzhu looked at the dark clouds in the sky and muttered to herself, "Is it going to open soon?" Grandmaster Nanming nodded solemnly and said, "Soon." He had lived on Xian Island for such a long time and had seen the opening of the East Holy Land several times. What he said was naturally correct. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he looked around curiously. He wanted to see how the Holy Land of the East would be opened. Right at this moment, the thunderbolts in the surrounding dark clouds suddenly disappeared at the same time. The wind between heaven and earth swept wildly, and the surrounding dark clouds quickly gathered together. In less than an hour, the entire sky above Xian Island was covered by dark clouds. The last ray of light disappeared, and the world was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. Not long after, thunder rumbled in the sky again, and it was getting more and more intense. The dark clouds in the sky flickered, as if they were brewing something. Suddenly, an intense and dazzling thunderbolt pierced through the dark clouds like a long sword and illuminated the entire world. The dark sky was shrouded by the rolling dark clouds, and the turbulent sea reflected the strong light. Then, a loud bang was heard. It was so loud that even the ground could feel the strong tremors. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth and felt that he couldn't hear anything. However, his eyes were still wide open as he looked at the place where the thunderbolt struck. It was the clouds that shrouded the East Holy Land no matter how strong the wind was. In the instant that the huge thunderbolt disappeared into the clouds, the world returned to darkness. However, Yu Qianzhou could faintly see that the moment the light disappeared, the unmoving cloud seemed to move. Chapter 708. Bang! With a loud explosion, another huge thunderbolt appeared in the dark clouds. The direction it struck was exactly where the previous thunderbolt struck. With the help of the strong light, one could see that the clouds shrouding the eastern sacred land, which could not be blown away by the wind, were slowly surging. Before the dazzling light disappeared, another shocking thunderbolt struck at the same location. Once the three thunderbolts appeared, it was as if a fuse had been lit. In an instant, the sky was filled with lightning and thunder. Densely packed green electric snakes flashed in the dark clouds and interweaved like a net. The scene was extremely shocking. Under the lightning, Xian Island was completely lit up. The surrounding sea surface was filled with billowing green light. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky shouldn't be called dark clouds, but lightning clouds. They were formed by dense lightning. Countless densely packed lightning bolts shot towards the sky above Xian Island and converged into a gigantic thunderbolt. Bang! Once again, the target was the same as the previous three lightning bolts. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened as he personally saw the clouds shrouding the eastern sacred land rotating slowly. Suddenly, as if the speed of rotation was too slow, earth-shattering explosions resounded. Countless lightning snakes gathered to form huge thunderbolts. They crazily struck out one after another. More and more of them appeared, and the frequency of the strikes also became denser and denser. This scene reminded Yu Qianzhou of a dozen heavy machine guns bombarding the same target. Other than the continuous loud explosion, nothing else could be heard. The dark clouds had turned into a world of thunder and lightning. The lightning shot out wildly, and everywhere was covered in a vast expanse of green. The four people on the main peak of Xian Island could clearly feel the entire mountain beneath their feet shaking. Rocks of all sizes on the mountain were rolling down the mountain. This was because they were not ordinary people. Their cultivation was not weak and they could circulate their energy to resist the tremors. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died from the tremors. Yu Qianqiu, whose cultivation was inferior, had already used his fingers to block his ears. Otherwise, he would not have been able to bear it. Even so, he still felt a little dizzy. He felt that his surroundings were filled with electromagnetism. All the hair on his body stood on end, as if there was an electric current flowing on the surface of his body. Although the Huaxia cultivators who were dozens of kilometers away were already very far away, they could still imagine the shocking scene in that place. All of them were dumbfounded as they looked at the shocking scene in the distance. Suddenly, someone noticed that hundreds of figures were flying towards the place where the lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The lords of the various countries had already kept their flying artifacts and were flying over quickly. They gathered at a spot several miles away from Xian Island and hovered in the air. Looking at the might of the world before them, even though this was not the first time they had seen it, they still felt their hearts tremble. In that instant, they felt how insignificant they were. In the face of the might of heaven and earth, no matter how high his cultivation was, he was nothing more than an ant in this world. The continuous thunderbolts continued for nearly an hour before they finally calmed down. The wind between the sea and the sky was getting fiercer and fiercer. That was because a huge whirlpool had formed in the sky where the lightning struck. It produced a powerful suction force and stirred up the surrounding airflow. Bai Changchun, Grandmaster Nan Ming, and Nongzhu were like nails nailed to the mountain peak, not moving an inch. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He could not withstand it with his cultivation. He lost his center of gravity due to the strong wind. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he felt like he was about to float away with the wind. Nongzhu looked at his bewildered expression and laughed sinisterly. At this moment, Grandmaster Nan Ming's bear-like palm pressed on Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. A warm current flowed into Yu Qianqiu's body, and he immediately stood firmly on the spot like a stake. Yu Qianqiu finally relaxed and could enjoy the scenery with peace of mind. The dense lightning in the dark clouds gradually died out, and the last ray of light between the heavens and the earth disappeared as well. Once again, they were plunged into complete darkness. All that was left in the surroundings was the strong wind blowing ceaselessly. However, Yu Qianqiu could clearly feel that the strong wind was slowly rising into the sky. The sound of the surging waves seemed to be gradually calming down, and it was no longer as impatient. At this moment, Grandmaster Nan Ming withdrew his palm from Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to feel up and down in the darkness. The wind was indeed much weaker, and the whistling sound reached the sky. Ouch! Yu Qianqiu cried out in pain. In the darkness, Nongzhu said angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, is there something wrong with you? How dare you touch my butt?" "Ah." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand, I don't have that kind of hobby. I really didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to feel the wind, and I accidentally touched you." Amidst their whispers, Grandmaster Nan Ming's laughter could be heard. "Wah! Old man Nan Ming, you!" Nongzhu screamed as her but was pinched by someone. "Don't misunderstand. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to feel the wind," Grandmaster Nan Ming snickered. Amidst the crackling noises, Nan Ming ancestors' blood-curdling screams could be heard. Nongzhu roared in anger, "King, feel the wind, is it something you pinched with your hands?" Yu Qianqiu quickly moved away to avoid being affected by the two people. Not long after, a bright white light appeared in the surrounding horizon, and it was expanding rapidly. The dark clouds in the sky were shrinking rapidly. In less than an hour, light once again shone on this part of the sea. The eastern sacred land was originally shrouded in white fog, but now, a black whirlpool appeared in the sky. It sucked in the dark clouds that were as thick as ink, like a tornado pillar. The area of the dark clouds in the sky became smaller and smaller, and they were gradually swallowed by the black whirlpool. After a while, the last piece of dark cloud was sucked in by the whirlpool. The sky returned to being bright and sunny, and the blue waves of the sea rippled normally. The only difference was that above the eastern sacred land, in the whirlpool that was dozens of meters wide, a dense electric web suddenly appeared. It was like a huge beast opening its fangs to devour. After more than 300 years, the eastern sacred land has finally opened. Grandmaster Nanming let out a long sigh. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw that his red hair and red beard had become messy as if someone had pulled them. Needless to say, it was definitely done by the furious Nongzhu. There were also many footprints on the buttocks of his red underpants. He reckoned that Nongzhu had something to do with them. Yu Qianqiu didn't have the mood to pay too much attention to this. He looked at the whirlpool that gathered lightning and said in a daze, "This whirlpool is the entrance to the eastern sacred land?" Grandmaster Nanming nodded and said, "That's right. An entrance with no exit can only be maintained for a period of time. After 6 hours, it will automatically close and return to normal. If you want to enter again, you have to wait for the next opening in 300 years. The three of them looked at Bai Changchun at the same time. They saw Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, slowly turn around and stare behind him expressionlessly. The three of them followed his gaze and immediately noticed the group of people several miles away. The cultivation of that group of people wasn't weak. They immediately noticed Bai Changchun looking at them, and they looked at each other guiltily. Pei Fong's fat face twitched, and he smiled awkwardly at the crowd. Bai Changchun is leaving, let's send him off. With him in the lead, more than 100 people quickly flew over. The space at the top of the main peak was limited, and it couldn't accommodate more than 100 people. Furthermore, they didn't dare to stand together with Bai Changchun, so they all landed at the foot of the main peak. All of them sneaked glances at Bai Changchun, but to their surprise, they realized that Yu Qianqiu was actually standing next to Bai Changchun. Grandmaster Nanming and Nongzhu were still acceptable, but that guy had such a big responsibility. What right did he have to stand next to Bai Changchun? Yu Qianqiu stared at the group of soul-forming experts below him, and he felt very pleased. The feeling of looking down at a group of soul-forming experts from a high position was very, very satisfying. Pei Fong cupped his broken palm and said with a smile, "We learned that Brother Bai is leaving, so we specially came to send you off. Nanming, Nongzhu, you're here too. Yo! Brother Yu Qianqiu is here too." Bai Changchun's sharp gaze swept across the people below, and finally, he stared at Pei Fong. He said lightly, "Pei Fong, are you the leader?" His indifferent words immediately scared Pei Fong so much that cold sweat broke out on his back. There were too many meanings in his words, and it was easy for people to misunderstand. Pei Fong's expression changed, and he immediately waved his hand and said, "No, no, we all agreed to come together. We thought that you were going to leave, so we all thought that we should send you off." As he said this, he turned around and asked the people behind him, "What do you think, everyone?" "Yes. Yes. Yes. We should send him off." The group of people replied meekly. None of them dared to raise their voices. Looking at the situation, the people standing at the front couldn't wait to shrink back even more. Now this was majestic. He could scare a group of soul-forming experts like grandchildren. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he looked at Bai Changchun with great admiration. Nongzhu, an ancestor of Nanming, looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. Bai Changchun's despotic power had suppressed everyone for too long, causing everyone to be afraid to the bone. One wrong look from him could immediately make a group of people tremble with fear. "In that case, should I thank you for your kindness?" Bai Changchun asked lightly. "No need, no need." Pei Fong squeezed out a smile on his fat face, and he waved his hand repeatedly and said, "We've all been in the cultivation world for so many years. It's only right for us to send you off, it's only right." At this moment, Bai Changchun suddenly looked far away. Everyone followed his gaze and saw a group of densely packed flying artifacts carrying a group of people flying over quickly. It was the group of people from the cultivation world of Huaxia. Led by Feng Xiangtian of Fuxian Island, hundreds of sect masters gathered. The closer they got to Xian Island, the faster their hearts beat. The legendary #1 expert in the world should be in front, but no one had seen him before. When everyone got closer and saw the group of lords on the main peak, they couldn't help but look at the 4 people standing on the peak. To be able to make the lords of the soul-forming realm submit to them, they were naturally extraordinary. Among them, there must be the legendary #1 expert in the world. Now that the patriarch was in front of them, they naturally had to come out and greet him. Bai Shouji, a descendant of the Bai family, greets the ancestor. Bai Shouji knelt on the flying magic tool in front of everyone with an emotional expression. The 2 Bai clan elders behind him also lifted their long robes in excitement and knelt down to pay their respects. The ancestor's name shook the world. As a descendant, he felt honored. Wu clan, Jing clan, and Tan clan's juniors greet ancestor. The 3 clan leaders and 2 clan elders each knelt. Putting aside the other 3 clans, just Bai Shouji's words alone had shocked everyone. His surname was Bai, and he called Bai Changchun old ancestor. Didn't that mean? Other than Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu, who were in the know, everyone else, including Nanming old ancestor, were shocked speechless. Especially those from Huaxia's cultivation world, they were all dumbfounded. At that moment, someone vaguely remembered that the 4 clans once had a very powerful figure. However, it was just a rumor without any proof. They didn't expect it to be the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun. Everyone's gaze moved back and forth between the 4 clans and Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun stared at the 4 clans and sighed. "What are you doing here?" There was a rare softness in his tone. No matter how ruthless he was, the 4 families in front of him were still his descendants. Now that he was leaving, his future was uncertain. Perhaps after this farewell, he would never have the chance to meet them again. Once Bai Changchun spoke, everyone's guess about the 4 clans became certain. They were really Bai Changchun's descendants. Oh my! He was Bai Changchun. The Huaxia cultivators first looked at Bai Changchun with great respect. Then, they looked at the 4 clans with complicated expressions. All of them cursed in their hearts. The 4 clans hid themselves too well. They had such a powerful backer, but they never revealed it. No wonder the 4 clans always advanced and retreated together. They were a family that wore the same pants. What's more, the sects that had conflicts with the 4 clans and had evil designs on the 4 clans were so scared that they didn't even dare to breathe. Bai Shouji, who was kowtowing, stood up and said excitedly, "Ancestor, I heard that you are going to the Holy East Land. How can the descendants of the 4 clans not come to send you off? Otherwise, we will be scolded by our descendants as unfilial descendants. Please don't be angry, ancestor. Please forgive us." "Forget it." Bai Changchun raised his hand at the 4 clans and said, "Get up." "Thank you, ancestor." The 4 clans kowtowed and stood up. They looked at Bai Changchun excitedly. Apart from the 4 clan heads, the other 6 clan elders had never seen Bai Changchun before. Originally, some of the 6 elders had doubts about the 4 clan heads going to the demon ghost region to see Bai Changchun. Now, all their doubts were gone. All that was left was excitement. Ancestor's might shook the world. He was truly the world's #1 expert. This glory was enough for future generations to praise and be proud of. Yu Qianqiu. Bai Changchun suddenly called out. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought that Bai Changchun wouldn't reveal their master-disciple relationship in front of everyone. However, since he had called out to him in front of everyone, it was time to announce their relationship. He immediately bowed and said, "Disciple is here." "Ah. He is." The surroundings immediately became chaotic, and a wave of exclamations rang out. Everyone was stunned and looked at Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. These two are actually master and disciple? Oh my God! Many of the feudal lords were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. Almost everyone had a part in hunting down Yu Qianqiu. Fortunately, that kid was lucky. If something really happened to him, it would be a big joke. Who was Bai Changchun? There was no need to doubt what would happen to him. Many people cursed Yu Qianqiu's 18 generations of ancestors in their hearts. He was forced to such a point, yet he still didn't reveal his backer. Even if he wanted to die, he didn't need to drag them down with him. Thank goodness, thank goodness, thank goodness this brat is still alive and kicking. The expressions of the soul formation stage feudal lords were rich and colorful. Now many people finally understood. No wonder this kid was always hanging out with Nongzhu. No wonder when Lanfeng began to support this kid after returning from the demon domain. No wonder this kid dared to run amok in the cultivation world and was not afraid of anything. It turned out that he had Bai Changchun behind him. No wonder he was qualified to stand beside Bai Changchun now. The people of the Huaxia cultivation world all stared at Yu Qianqiu with complicated and fiery expressions. His background was too powerful. When this truth was announced, it was like a bolt from the blue to everyone. All of them were stunned. Bai Changchun stared at the four major families and said slowly, if the four families live their lives according to their own will, if they encounter any trouble in the future, they don't seek to live forever and don't seek to be illustrious. As long as it's within your ability, there's no need to force it. You can be a little more considerate. This can also be considered as fulfilling the relationship between me and the four families. Yu Qianqiu didn't give any guarantee. He just cupped his hands and said indifferently, rest assured, master. This disciple will remember. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and waved to the four families. There's nothing for you to do here. Go back quickly and live your own lives. The four families looked at each other. They were here to send off their ancestor. Now that the ancestor hadn't been sent off, how could they go back? Seeing that the four wanted to say something, Yu Qianqiu glanced at the soul formation stage feudal lords and said sternly, for family heads, don't say anything more. Listen to master's arrangements and go back immediately. Don't make master angry. Otherwise, you will all be unfilial descendants. At this point, the four families didn't dare to disobey their ancestor. They all knelt again and said, yes, ancestor. Farewell, ancestor. Then, they stood up and flew around the various sects on their flying Dharma artifact. Under the envious gazes of the sects, they quickly flew back to Huaxia. At this time, there was a commotion among the sects in Huaxia. They must have secretly sent the same message. They all bowed to Bai Changchun and said, greetings, Senior Bai. Yu Qianqiu looked at these people speechlessly. He didn't know what they wanted to do. But at this time, he was suddenly stunned. Among the people bowing, there were four women in white standing on a flying Dharma artifact behind the people from Fuxian Island. Two of them bowed and the other two stood straight. They didn't bow. They were very eye-catching in the crowd. Yu Qianqiu knew the person in the lead. It was the Moon Clan Master, Jade Flower Fairy. Jade Flower Fairy was biting her lips and staring at them. Hua Rui, who was standing beside her, was also looking at them in astonishment. Yu Qianqiu guessed what they were looking at. He tilted his head and was slightly stunned. Suddenly, he understood everything. They were looking at none other than the elegant island master of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest, the famous Mr. Nongzhu. Nongzhu also looked at Jade Flower Fairy with a dumbfounded expression. He probably didn't expect to meet Jade Flower Fairy on Xianxian Island. The man and the woman finally met each other. Yu Qianqiu immediately lowered his head and laughed. He wanted to find a chance to drag Jade Flower Fairy to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest to discuss Nongzhu. Now it seemed that there was no need at all. He didn't need to think about being the bad guy anymore. He just needed to watch the show. Seeing him laughing like this, Bai Changchun and the Nanming patriarch looked at him with questioning eyes. When Yu Qianzhou noticed their eyes, he immediately felt that he had lost his composure. He coughed and straightened his expression. First, he sent a voice transmission to Bai Changchun, "Master, the beautiful woman standing at the front is Zi's mother." Then, as if wanting the world to be in chaos, he sent a telepathic message to Grandmaster Nanming, "Senior Nanming, the beautiful woman standing at the very front is an old flame that Senior Nongzhu secretly dumped. We haven't seen her for many years. Don't tell others that I said it." Chapter 710. Bai Changchun was already looking at Ziyi's mother. Ancestor Nanming asked in disbelief, "Nongzhu's lover? Really? You're not lying to me, are you?" "Senior Nanming, what are you talking about? I'm famous for my credibility. Everyone in the cultivation world knows that. I've never lied in my life. That woman is the leader of the Moon clan of Huaxia. People call her Fairy Qianghua. If you don't believe me, you can ask Senior Nongzhu. I promise I'm telling the truth. But don't tell him I said it, or he'll fight me to the death." "Okay. I know. Fairy Qianghua, the leader of the Moon clan of Huaxia." Ancestor Nanming tilted his head and looked at Nongzhu. Seeing her dumbfounded look, he immediately believed Yu Qianzhou's words. He rolled his eyes and shouted at Fairy Qianghua, "Is that the leader of the Moon clan, Fairy Qianghua?" His words shocked everyone. Everyone looked at Ancestor Nanming, wondering how he knew Fairy Qianghua. Because of Yunantian and Huazongming's mistakes, the feudal lords of the various countries immediately let their imaginations run wild. Could it be that the Nanming old ancestor had also taken a fancy to this woman? Fairy Qianghua turned a deaf ear and kept biting her lips while looking at Nongzhu. On the other hand, Nongzhu was almost the same. Hua Rui came to her senses. She quickly pulled Fairy Qianghua and repeated what Ancestor Nanming said. People who could stand next to Bai Changchun were not ordinary people. They couldn't afford to offend them at all. However, her brother-in-law, the handsome and peerless brother-in-law, the brother-in-law named Xiao Yao, the brother-in-law who suddenly disappeared with a baby, she would never mistake him for someone else. That mortal from the mortal world was now standing at the peak of the cultivation world with Bai Changchun. Who exactly was he? Fairy Qianghua came back to her senses. She looked a bit sad. She turned and bowed slightly to Ancestor Nanming. "I'm the leader of the Moon clan, Qianghua. How do you know me? Forgive this junior's poor eyesight, but I don't think I've seen Senior before." Ancestor Nanming, who had been beaten up by Nongzhu in the dark because he had pinched Nongzhu's butt, was wearing a pair of red underpants. With his hands on his hips, he laughed out loud and said, "I am the island master of Xian Island. In the cultivation world, people call me Ancestor Nanming." His arrogant and proud laughter echoed in all directions. All the sects in Huaxia were astonished. It turned out that this was Nanming Ancestor, one of the four great men who was equally famous as Bai Changchun in the cultivation world. Qianghua Fairy was also slightly surprised. She bowed again and said, "Senior Nanming, it's my honor to meet you." Ancestor Nanming glanced at Nongzhu and saw that she was glaring at him. He was too lazy to pay attention to her and continued to laugh. "I've long heard of Fairy Qianghua's great name. I would like to do my best as a host and invite you to stay on Xian Island as a guest. Would you be willing to give me face?" Qianghua Fairy glanced at Nongzhu and replied solemnly, "How can I reject your invitation?" Good, good, good." Ancestor Nanming laughed and said, "Good" 3 times in a row. Then he stopped talking. Almost everyone present could not wrap their heads around this and did not know what was going on. Bai Changchun, on the other hand, glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing obediently on the side. Nongzhu frowned and seemed to have figured something out in an instant. She stared angrily at Yu Qianqiu, who looked like an honest man, and asked him telepathically, "Yu Qianqiu, was it you who told Nanming ancestor Nanming?" Yu Qianqiu immediately denied it with telepathy, "No. Bullsh *t. Out of the four of us, only you and I have seen her. How could Nanming ancestor Nanming know that she is Chunghua Fairy, the head of the Moon Clan? Who else could it be if it wasn't you? Don't accuse a good person here. I was just wondering how Senior Nanming knew her." Yu Qianqiu replied, "Do you think it's possible that old ancestor Nanming really admired Fairy Viburnum's name for a long time? In addition to Fairy Viburnum's outstanding appearance, he guessed it immediately. Oh my god! Could it be that Senior Nanming has taken a fancy to Fairy Jasper Flower? Oh my god! Then you guys are..." Nongzhu's teeth hurt when she heard this. The muscles on her face twitched and a trace of panic flashed across her face. She turned to look at the smiling ancestor Nanming and found that he was staring at Chunghua Fairy with an expression that he had never shown to any woman before. The more she looked, the more she looked like Chunghua Fairy. It was really like what Yu Qianqiu had said. At this moment, Bai Changchun slowly floated up into the sky and turned to face the black whirlpool and the white fog that enveloped the East Holy Land. His body gradually rose into the sky. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on the rising figure in the green robe. They all knew what he was going to do. The blue sky, the blue sea, the East Pole opened. Bai Changchun slowly rose into the sky, ready to take the risk alone. Although the figure in the green robe was thin, it gave people a sense of heroism at this moment. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's expressions instantly became solemn, and they were vaguely worried. The lords of various countries looked a little expectant, as if they could not wait for Bai Changchun to leave quickly. As for Yu Qianqiu, he seemed to be a little indifferent. He only came here to see how his master entered the legendary East Holy Land. If it was not for the long talk that lasted through the night, Yu Qianqiu would probably also be worried about Bai Changchun. However, after the long talk that lasted through the night, he knew the details of Bai Changchun's cultivation, and basically, he was not worried anymore. Moreover, just in case, he even revealed the secret of the golden bead teleportation and even gave Bai Changchun a bunch of small silver beads so that if Bai Changchun encountered any danger that he could not solve, he could immediately contact him and he would immediately move Bai Changchun out. All the Huaxia cultivators looked at each other, and they all looked at Feng Xiangtian expectantly. Feng Xiangtian had no choice but to bite the bullet and shout loudly, "Senior Bai, the Huaxia cultivation world is in danger, please save us, Senior." Bai Changchun turned a deaf ear to him and continued to rise. He was already close to the center of the black vortex, swoosh. The lords of various countries stared at Feng Xiangtian like sharp blades, and they could not wait to poke a bloody hole in his body. What does this guy want to do? Does he want to summon Bai Changchun back to deal with us? Feng Xiangtian immediately felt chills all over his body when he was stared at by these people. However, the more he was at this juncture, the more he wanted to save himself. Just as he was about to call for help again, he saw a transparent light shield suddenly appear around Bai Changchun's body. Obviously, Bai Changchun was ready to go in. "Senior Bai, the Huaxia cultivation world is in danger, please save us, Senior." Feng Xiangtian shouted loudly again and again. However, Bai Changchun did not care about him at all. Even the lords of various countries could not be bothered to reason with him for the time being. All their attention was focused on the sky, and they could not take their eyes off him. Even with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he had released protective aura to protect his body. It could be seen that he did not dare to underestimate the situation and had made thorough preparations. In the rapidly spinning black vortex, dense electric snakes shuttled back and forth like a net, like a monster opening its huge mouth to devour, staring at the green-robed figure floating in the air. Because of the sudden appearance of Bai Changchun in the wind gap, the originally whirling black vortex suckers suddenly made the invisible wind pillar that had no resistance become chaotic, almost turning into tangible wind blades, whipping at Bai Changchun's protective aura chi. Woo woo. Swoosh swoosh. A shrill and strange sound appeared in the sky, like a giant beast opening its fangs with lightning and roaring. Suddenly, Bai Changchun's figure shot toward the center of the black vortex like a green meteor. Everyone's eyes could hardly react, and they saw the figure crash into the center of the black vortex in the blink of an eye. In an instant, rapid flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder appeared in the black vortex, as if the intruding figure had created a wave that resembled lightning. Then, the movement gradually calmed down, and Bai Changchun's figure completely disappeared in the black vortex. Everyone present held their breaths with rapt attention. No one even breathed loudly. Although they saw Bai Changchun enter, they still stared fixedly at the black whirlpool with lightning bolts swirling around it. After a long time, it was estimated that the 6 hours of the opening of the Holy East Land was over. The black vortex embedded in the white fog gradually shrank, and the lightning in it shone with green light. Finally, along with the shrinking black vortex, it disappeared in the vast white fog. In an instant, the world returned to normal, and the rapid spinning sound disappeared. There was only the sound of the sea breeze blowing and the sound of the waves hitting the rocky shore. Everyone came back to their senses and looked at each other, especially the lords of the various countries. All of them let out a sigh of relief and looked at each other with an irrepressible smile of excitement. The number one expert in the world who had suppressed everyone for many years was finally gone. The terrifying expert who made everyone tremble with fear was finally gone. The god of death finally went to the Holy East Land where he would never return. The stone that had been pressing on everyone's hearts for many years was finally removed. The haze that had shrouded their hearts for many years was finally blown away. Breathing in the free sea breeze of Xian Island, they could feel a trace of sweetness. Pei Fong's eyes flickered as he looked around. After making eye contact with Qi Zhejuan and Ouyangde, Pei Fong couldn't help but let out an arrogant ga laughter towards the sky. The two of them also laughed heartily. Their laughter echoed in the sky above Xian Island. The time that belonged to them had finally arrived. Bai Changchun was gone, and Yin Baikong was dead. As long as the three of them united, Bing Qingzi and Hu Changsha would not be difficult to deal with. As long as they took care of these two. Although Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was high, he was actually the easiest person to deal with. As long as they spent some time and played some tricks, they would not have to worry about not being able to deal with him. As long as they took care of these three people, from now on, no one in this world would be able to restrict their freedom. How could they not be happy when they thought of the day where they could freely roam the world after cultivating for a lifetime? The people of the Chinese cultivation world already felt that the situation was not good. They all regretted coming here. Now, it was tantamount to sending sheep into a tiger's mouth. All of them started to beat a retreat in their hearts and slowly retreated, hoping that the lords of the various countries would not bother with them now that they were in high spirits. This person could always come up with childish ideas to comfort me when he was on the verge of despair. Actually, most of the spirit-severing realm lords were indeed in high spirits and did not have any thoughts of taking care of them now. However, when Yan Ji glanced over, his killing intent instantly rose. He immediately shouted angrily, "All of you, stop!" His proud disciple had died in the Chinese cultivation world. He had long since lost his good impression of the Chinese cultivators. How could he let them go now? Chapter 7:11. Before he finished speaking, Yan Ji's figure had already disappeared from where he was and blocked the retreat of the Huaxia sections. He floated in the air with a ferocious expression and sneered, "Want to run? Since you've delivered yourselves to me, why don't you all stay here?" The small sects that had been standing at the back immediately became the first to retreat. Some of them even almost bumped into Yan Ji, who had suddenly appeared. They were so frightened that they quickly retreated with their flying celestial devices. The Huaxia sects were like birds startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. They were all in a mess, huddling together and taking unnecessary precautions. Seeing this scene, many of the feudal lords burst into laughter. Yan Ji was obviously very proud of his ability to scare the Huaxia sects like this. He pointed at the sect that almost bumped into him and said arrogantly, "How dare you talk back to me? All of you kneel and kowtow to apologize, or I'll start with you first." There were only 3 people standing on the small flying celestial device. Hearing this, all of them were extremely indignant. However, they were no match for Yan Ji, who was a legendary soul formation expert. They might not be able to escape today. Nongzhu and the great ancestor of Nanming silently looked at the wild lords of the various countries and didn't say anything. These people had been suppressed by Bai Changchun for many years. Now that Bai Changchun had left, they would probably vent their pent-up anger on these Huaxia cultivators. It was understandable. But then again, did it matter to them whether the Huaxia cultivators lived or died? For those who struggled in the cultivation world, life and death were all decided in an instant. Life and death were not important. This was actually a part of cultivation. It all depended on whether one could break through safely. However, Yu Qianqiu's expression was not so good. He had long known that these Huaxia cultivators would definitely be unlucky to break through at this time. Otherwise, Bai Changchun wouldn't have let the 4 clans leave first. There were some things that Bai Changchun was well aware of. The world was full of misfortunes. Once he left, it would be useless to worry about what would happen after him. For the sake of his relationship with the 4 great families, he had stayed for a while and bought time for the 4 great families to leave. He had already done his best. Yu Qianqiu was well aware of this, which was why he helped Bai Changchun urge the 4 families to leave. Although he himself did not have a good impression of the people of the Chinese cultivation world, and after the long talk with Bai Changchun that night, his view of the situation was no longer limited to the Chinese cultivation world, but the whole world. If Yan Ji were to kill someone, he might weigh the pros and cons and turn a blind eye to it in order to protect himself. However, Yan Ji actually made a Chinese cultivator kneel and accept the humiliation. After all, he was born in the Huaxia cultivation world. It was difficult for him to watch the Huaxia cultivators being humiliated before their death. He had the urge to stand up for the Huaxia cultivators. This kind of impulsive nature was called bloodthirstiness. In his previous life, it was because of this kind of uncontrollable bloodthirstiness that ultimately led to the tragic end of his fate. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fists, but in the end, he still endured it. Nongzhu slightly tilted her head and glanced at him. At this moment, one of the 3 people on the flying celestial device that almost hit Yan Ji suddenly turned around and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, I am Tu Yanfeng, an elder of the Huaxia Imperial Sword Sect. Do you remember what you said to me in the Cultivation Alliance?" Everyone stared at Yu Qianqiu. Nongzhu and the ancestor of Nanming also looked at him curiously, wondering what on earth Yu Qianqiu had said to him. Many Huaxia cultivators remembered that when Yu Qianqiu left the Cultivation Alliance, he had promised Tu Yanfeng that if the Imperial Sword Sect encountered any trouble, he could use the name of Yu Qianqiu. Tu Yanfeng was a straightforward person. Otherwise, he would not have clashed with Yu Qianqiu even though he knew that he was no match for him. At this critical moment, he still spoke tactfully. Although he wanted to beg Yu Qianqiu, he only reminded Yu Qianqiu if he still remembered what he had said in the past. If Yu Qianqiu had forgotten, he would not say anything more. He just wanted to try with a glimmer of hope. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He stared at Tu Yanfeng's face and tried to recognize him. He immediately remembered what Tu Yanfeng said when he pretended to be generous and let him go. Although he clearly saw Yan Ji staring at him with a pair of cold eyes that were filled with killing intent, he still smiled. He cupped his hands and said, "So it's Elder Tu from the Imperial Sword School. Since we're old acquaintances, please come and have a chat." Before Tu Yanfeng could reply, the head of the Imperial Sword sect had already flown over on his flying celestial device and floated in front of Yu Qianqiu. Tu Yanfeng glanced at the head slightly and looked a little embarrassed. At the head's greeting, the three of them jumped down, put away their flying celestial devices, and bowed to Ancestor Nanming, Nongzhu, and Yu Qianqiu. Ancestor Nanming and Nongzhu just looked at them expressionlessly and had no intention of paying attention to them. Instead, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Elder Tu, I haven't seen you for many years. How have you been?" Tu Yanfeng looked a little ashamed. He lowered his head and cupped his hands, not saying anything. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile. To be honest, this kind of person who was too ashamed was not suitable to live in the cultivation world, but he admired him. Hee. Yan Ji stared at them and sneered. He squinted his eyes and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, what do you mean? Do you want to protect them from me?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze slowly shifted from Tu Yanfeng to Yan Ji. He asked in a neutral tone, "From what you're saying, could it be that you want to kill them from my hands?" The meaning of his words could not be clearer. It was obvious that he wanted to protect the people of the Imperial Sword School. Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming frowned at the same time. Among the feudal lords, many people were already laughing mockingly. They were laughing at Yu Qianqiu for overestimating himself. Yan Ji immediately threw his head back and laughed loudly. "You want to protect them? I haven't even settled the score of killing this old man's disciple, but you've already delivered yourself to me." Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully, "Old man, it's not that I'm looking down on you, but I'm standing right here. If you have the ability, come and try to touch me." Presumptuous. It's time to settle the score between us. Hua Zongming and Pu Taidong rose into the air and stood at the same level as the people on the mountain peak. Although their words were directed at Yu Qianqiu, they were also staring at Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming. Their meaning was clear. They wanted to suppress Ancestor Nanming and Nongzhu, preventing them from interfering with Yan Ji's killing of Yu Qianqiu. Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming's faces darkened. They looked at each other and nodded slightly. They were ready to protect Yu Qianqiu. Nongzhu, in particular, took out the bamboo flute from her waist and held it in her hand. Her whole body was bursting with fighting spirit. She could not tolerate someone bullying Bai Changchun's disciple. As soon as he left, seeing that someone was cooperating with him, Yan Ji was full of smiles. He shook his head and said, "Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu. I wanted to spare your life today for the sake of Bai Changchun. Who knew that you would come to me to court death? Bai Changchun is not here anymore. Who do you think you are? Give me your life." With a loud shout, Yan Ji turned into a shadow and directly rushed over. He was as fast as lightning, carrying the momentum of wind and thunder. He arrived in the blink of an eye. Almost at the same time, Nongzhu shouted angrily, "Nanming, protect Yu Qianqiu." He had already rushed out. With a loud bang, the two phantoms collided and directly collided together. Obviously, Nongzhu's cultivation was higher. Yan Ji let out a muffled groan, and his body was directly knocked back. Hua Zongming and Pu Taidong looked at each other and nodded solemnly. They both shot toward Nongzhu in the air. In an instant, Nongzhu split into two figures in the air and faced the two of them respectively. Bang, bang. Qi Zhoujuan said expressionlessly, "It's a pity that Mu Sang, Miao Hanyuan, and Xu Xin are not here. Otherwise, we can see if Nongzhu can fight against 6 people with her transfiguration transposition skill." Pei Fang chuckled and said, "Mu Sang and Miao Hanyuan will naturally help when they are here. However, Xu Xin seems to be in the same boat as Nongzhu. I don't know who will help who." His words immediately made the lords of various countries laugh. Chapter 7:12. The lords of various countries were in a good mood. They were all watching the show. But the Huaxia cultivators were watching the fierce fight above them in horror. They didn't dare to leave or run away. They were all standing there restlessly. With tears in her eyes, Chionghua Fairy stared at the fierce fight in the sky. Her red lips moved and she murmured with a bitter smile, "Nongzhu. He is Mr. Nongzhu, the famous owner of the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Mr. Nongzhu is Xiaoyao, and Xiaoyao is Mr. Nongzhu. Why did you lie to me? You lied to me so miserably." Yan Ji's words, "Nongzhu, today is the day you die," immediately made Chionghua Fairy, who had been paying attention to Nongzhu, understand everything. Hua Rui, who was beside her, stared at the sky in a daze, her eyes shining with a strange light. She had never expected that her brother-in-law, who had suddenly disappeared, was such a powerful figure. He was also a famous figure in the cultivation world. His cultivation was too strong. It was said that he was a close friend of the most powerful cultivator in the world. My God! What on earth did my sister miss? Bang! A heavy sound came from high up in the sky. A figure smashed into the sea like a meteor, creating a huge splash. Before the waves had completely returned, the falling figure shot out from the ocean once again. With an angry roar, it said, "Kill him together." It was Yan Ji's voice. It seemed like he had suffered a loss again. As soon as he finished speaking, two beams of sword light appeared in the sky. They shone with each other and strangled Nongzhu's hundreds of phantoms crazily. Yan Ji, who had rushed up to the sky, waved the long whip in his hand completely. In an instant, the dark and gloomy whip shadows shot out disorderly like arrows. After cooperating with Hua Zhongming and Pu Taidong, who were moving freely in the sky, they immediately suppressed the over 100 shadows of Nongzhu to less than 50. It made people feel that Nongzhu was in a precarious situation. Chionghua Fairy was still immersed in the memories of the past with tears in her eyes, but Hua Rui was a little worried by the movement above. "Senior Nanming, go and help Senior Nongzhu. I'm fine here," Yu Qianqiu said in a low voice. Although he couldn't see clearly what was happening above, he could feel that Nongzhu's qi power was suppressed by Yan Ji and the other two. Old ancestor Nanming turned around to look at him, and he was instantly slightly shocked. He discovered that there were two balls of pitch-black flames leaping about in Yu Qianqiu's eyes as if they were about to jump out of his eye sockets uncontrollably. Moreover, he could faintly feel a bone-chilling coldness from Yu Qianqiu's body. That faintly discernible and terrifying aura made one's hair stand on end. Nongzhu will be fine for the time being. The old man still has some powerful skills that he hasn't used yet. Just as Patriarch Nanming finished speaking, the situation in the sky suddenly changed. Dozens of phantoms of Nongzhu, who had been suppressed by the three of them, suddenly emerged from the gaps of their encirclement. Dozens of phantoms danced in the air like flying fairies. The speed was getting faster and faster. The people watching from below only felt that their eyes were blurred. In an instant, each of Nongzhu's phantoms suddenly appeared as a clone. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of vivid and lifelike Nongzhu appeared in the air and surrounded the three of them again. Yan Ji and the other two were so fast that their figures could not be seen clearly. They attacked each of Nongzhu's phantoms crazily, but it seemed that every attack missed. They couldn't find out which one was the real Nongzhu. All of Nongzhu's phantoms suddenly stopped moving in the air. Some were standing, some were lying, some were leaning, some were tilting, and some were sitting with their legs crossed. Each of them was vivid and lifelike. They were handsome and elegant, fully displaying the peerless elegance of the most handsome man in the world. Every attack of Yan Ji and the other two easily pierced, slashed through each of the phantoms. They had no effect on the hundreds of phantoms that stopped in the air. Because they were all phantoms, physical attacks had no effect on them. Just when the three of them had attacked every phantom without any effect, the hundreds of phantoms stared at the three of them with smiles on their faces. Suddenly, they gently placed the flute to their lips in unison. Their 10 fingers moved up and down the flute holes in a carefree and unrestrained manner. A melodious flute sound reverberated endlessly between the heaven and the earth. Suddenly, the world became clear. It seemed that the people could no longer hear the whistling wind or the sound of the raging waves hitting the shore. They were in the sea area, but at this moment, they suddenly found themselves in a brilliant sea of flowers. The spring sun was beautiful, and the flowers were gorgeous. Many butterflies were flying in the sea of flowers, and many children were running happily in the sea of flowers. They seemed to have returned to their childhood, playing hide-and-seek and catching butterflies in the flowers. And they were one of the happy children. Just when they were gradually immersed in the happy times of their childhood, Pei Fong suddenly shouted angrily, "What a powerful sound illusion!" The phantoms in front of them suddenly shattered like porcelain vases that had fallen to the ground. All the beautiful scenes were shattered into pieces by Pei Fong's angry shout. In front of them was still Xian Island, and still this sea area. They were all illusions. Everyone was shocked. Only now did they remember that the fight was still going on. But why was there no sound of fighting? They hurriedly looked again, and just happened to see a body with its head smashed into pieces, falling powerlessly into the sea. In the air, Nongzhu and Hua Zongming stood face to face. However, Hua Zongming's head drooped down powerlessly. From his back, several bloody holes could be seen. A bamboo flute had pierced through his chest and drilled out from his heart. The hole at the end of the flute was bleeding profusely. Yan Ji's eyes were wide open, and he looked at Nongzhu in disbelief. He was swaying in the air, and the whip in his hand had long disappeared. One of his hands was covering his throat, and blood was flowing through the gaps between his fingers. His other hand, which was covering the left side of his chest, was also a patch of bright red. "Yan Ji, I told you that you couldn't kill me, but you just didn't believe me. I didn't want to kill anyone, but you forced me to kill you. Why do you have to do this?" Nongzhu looked at Yan Ji expressionlessly and said. Suddenly, a heavy palm landed on Hua Zongming's chest. The flute flew out from Hua Zongming's back and shot out in an arc. With a bang, it directly blew Yan Ji's head into pieces. The 2 corpses fell to the sea at the same time, splashing 2 waves. Nongzhu's flute drilled into the sea with a whoosh. It stirred in the sea for a while, and then bounced out with a bang, landing in Nongzhu's hand in the air. Nongzhu held it in her hand and looked at it, as if she was checking if it was clean. Then she nodded with satisfaction and teleported back to Nanming ancestor and Yu Qincho's side. Everyone looked at Nongzhu in shock. Whether it was the lords of the various countries or the Huaxia cultivators, they didn't expect that Nongzhu could kill 3 lords of the mid-divine transformation realm in the blink of an eye. 1 against 3. They were all at the mid-divine transformation realm, but he killed them all, and he was completely unharmed. What did this mean? The lords of the various countries looked at each other. Yan Ji, Hua Zongming, and Pu Taidong died just like that. This was a little hard for them to accept. They thought that Nongzhu would have a hard time in the future without Bai Changchun's support. Now it seemed that even without Bai Changchun's support, as long as he didn't offend the late divine transformation realm cultivators, he could still live freely without Bai Changchun's support. The skills he showed just now were enough to prove it. At least from the current situation, most of the lords might not be a match for Nongzhu. Jade Flower Fairy bit her lip. She didn't change at all because of Nongzhu's powerful skills. She still looked resentful with tears in her eyes. However, Hua Rui was different. Not only was she excited, but she couldn't hide the excitement in her eyes. She really wanted to run to Nongzhu, pull his arm, and call him brother-in-law happily, just like in the past. Hua Rui's imagination ran wild. If brother-in-law could reconcile with sister, with brother-in-law's ability, who would dare to touch the Moon clan in the future? Nongzhu looked around coldly. The murderous aura around him was still there. He actually wasn't a bloodthirsty person. He just wanted to live a carefree life without competing with the world. He didn't want to offend anyone on purpose, nor did he want to have conflicts with anyone. He didn't want to kill anyone either. That was because he thought that he was born with no ambition. There was no need for him to waste his energy fighting with others. However, he wasn't a soft-hearted person either. When it was time to kill, he never hesitated. Today, even though he killed to protect Yu Qianqiu, it was also to avoid trouble for himself in the future. He deliberately killed in front of everyone to intimidate them. As soon as Bai Changchun left, these people showed their arrogance and were ready to make trouble. They actually targeted Bai Changchun's disciple. If he didn't intimidate them now, when would he? Once they attacked together, he wouldn't be able to block them even if he wanted to with his current level of cultivation. Ancestor Nanming glanced at Nongzhu. He didn't seem surprised that Nongzhu could kill Yan Ji and the other two. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. However, he wasn't surprised because Bai Changchun once told him not to underestimate Nongzhu. She wasn't as easy to bully as she looked. However, Yu Qianqiu kept looking at the flute in Nongzhu's hand. He felt a little nauseous. This was definitely not the first time this flute had killed someone. He thought of Nongzhu playing the flute next to his lips and then the scene of his opponent's intestines being pierced or brains being smashed. How could he stuff such a disgusting thing into his mouth? He really had to give it to him. That scene was like a bloodthirsty swordsman licking his lips after killing the enemy and tasting the blood on his sword. The atmosphere was a little quiet. Pei Fong stared at Nongzhu coldly. He looked left and right and transmitted his voice to Qi Zhejuan and Ouyangde. You've all seen it. Nongzhu is very likely to break through to the soul transformation final stage soon. Keeping him here won't do us any good. Why don't we take the opportunity now? What do you think? The two nodded slightly, obviously agreeing with Pei Fong's words. Pei Fong immediately chuckled and looked up at Nongzhu. Nongzhu, I really couldn't tell. What a good trick. Even I, Pei Fong, have to admire you. However, almost all the forces here had disciples who died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. It's time to end it today. Nongzhu, I advise you to hand over Yu Qianqiu obediently. Don't put up any unnecessary resistance. Otherwise, hee. Don't blame us for being impolite. Chapter 7:13. The lords of the spirit severing realm quickly exchanged glances. None of them were fools. The meaning behind Pei Fong's words was self-evident. Ancestor Nanming quickly glanced at Pei Fong, Qi Zhejuan, and Ouyangde. Yu Qianqiu gnashed his teeth in hatred. Sure enough, none of them were good. They were all capricious villains. Damn fatty, don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll make you feel good. Nongzhu also narrowed her eyes and sneered, Fatty Pei, when Bai Changchun was here, you still called Yu Qianqiu brother Yu. Why do you want to kill him in the blink of an eye? I haven't seen your brother do anything wrong to you. Could it be that you're deliberately looking for trouble and want to get rid of me as well? Pei Fong didn't mind being seen through by Nongzhu. Instead, he laughed and said, Nongzhu, if you insist on saying that, then what else can I say? He floated in the air and said with a laugh, then let me have a taste of brother Nongzhu's shifting position transposition skill. No problem, but before that, I have something to confirm with you. Nongzhu said. Pei Fong waved his hand and pretended to be generous, say it. As long as it's something that can be said, I'll tell you. What he said was the same as not saying it. Nongzhu snorted, I've asked you about this matter in the cornucopia before. That day, when Yu Qianqiu confronted the underworld messenger at the cornucopia, the underworld messenger suddenly found out about Yu Qianqiu's identity when he was leaving. Was it you who leaked it? Pei Fong's smile froze. He didn't expect that she would suddenly ask about this matter. He immediately became angry and shouted, "Nongju, don't talk nonsense here. I've already said that it's none of my business." He was the one who did it, but he definitely wouldn't admit it. The reputation of betraying the enemy and colluding with the enemy was much worse than some bad reputation. Nongju sneered. She looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Do you know what to do now?" Yu Qianqiu stared at Pei Fong coldly. He knew that Nongju would not say something like that without reason. It seemed that Pei Fong had done something behind her back then. It was no wonder that the green-browed guy had suddenly turned against him. Yu Qianqiu stared at Pei Fong coldly. But the strange thing was, why did Nongju tell him this now? However, Nongju's next words immediately made him understand. Nongju said, "Help me take care of Ze." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Nongju obviously knew that he was no match for Pei Fong, and she was entrusting him with her funeral. At this time, Nongju told him that she had been plotted against by Pei Fong. She just wanted to tell him that she would avenge him if there was a chance. Nongju was ready to die. Ancestor Nanming suddenly looked at Nongju. He and Nongju were old friends, but he didn't understand why Nongju thought that Yu Qianqiu could escape and have a chance to avenge him. In addition to Pei Fong, Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyangde were also eyeing him covetously. Of course, he didn't know that Bai Changchun had once told Nongju that Yu Qianqiu was more resistant to death than the two of them. It seemed that he had a treasure to protect him, which made it difficult for others to kill him. Therefore, he pinned his hope on Yu Qianqiu. "Don't talk nonsense. I'll take care of your disciple for you." Pei Fong suddenly burst out a terrible momentum, and the airflow around him spread out like visible waves. Hua Rui suddenly grabbed Jasper Flower Fairy's arm, looking very nervous. If it was before, they might not know who Pei Fong was. But since the cultivation world of Huaxia extended its tentacles, they naturally heard of this master at the last stage of Huaxia. He was one of the legendary top 10 masters. Could Nongju deal with him? Damn it. Damn fatty, just you wait and see. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart and prepared to escape with Nongju. He couldn't let Nongju die in Pei Fong's hands. As for the Nanming Patriarch, as one of the four great men, Pei Fong didn't dare to hurt him easily. He just had to take Nongju away. After all, he didn't know much about the Nanming Patriarch. The fewer people who knew about the secret of Utopia, the better. However, at this critical moment, a figure suddenly teleported over and stood in front of Nongju. He sneered at Pei Fong and said, "Pei Fong, you're going too far. Bai Changchun just left, and you're doing this. It's really disappointing. I'll be the first one who can't stand it anymore." It was Hu Changshou, who had been standing at the side without saying a word. Nongju, Yu Qianqiu, and the Nanming Patriarch looked at each other. They didn't expect Hu Changshou to come out to help. It was too surprising. Especially Yu Qianqiu. He had a feud with the Yun Palace, and Hu Changshou had wanted to kill him for a long time. Why did he come out to help now? This was simply too inconceivable. Not to mention them, even the feudal lords were at a loss. When did Hu Changshou become a Samaritan? Didn't he know that Pei Fong, Ouyangde, and Qi Zhoujuan were on the same side? Did he have the ability to fight the three of them alone? Hu Changshou. Pei Fong was stunned at first, then he sneered and said, "When did you were the same side as Nongju? You came here to act like a hero. I hope you don't run later." Hee hee. "We didn't look for you, but you came to die. Great. Today is a good day to settle the score between us." As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyangde had already flashed over. They stared at Hu Changshou with killing intent. Seeing that a battle was inevitable, everyone slowly retreated. A battle between soul formation final stage experts was no joke. Hu Changshou said calmly, "Settle the score." I don't know who will settle the score. Even if I don't stop you, you probably don't have the guts to touch them. If you're not afraid of that person from the demon domain, go ahead and attack. Ha! Pei Fong's fat face shook as he cackled. Hu Changshu, I think you're out of your mind. Bai Changchun has already gone to the East Holy Land, and you're still using him to scare us. Now, the demon domain. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt as if someone was strangling his neck. He couldn't laugh anymore, and the fat on his face stiffened. Qi Zhoujuan and O Yangda's expressions also changed abruptly, as if they remembered something. Laugh. Why aren't you laughing anymore? Fatty Pei, continue laughing. Hu Changshu sneered and said, I think you're too excited. It's true that Bai Changchun left, but don't forget that the demon domain torturers are passed down from generation to generation. If one Bai Changchun leaves, there's always another Bai Changchun. Every torturer of the demon domain torture was a figure whose name shook the world. For countless years, no one had ever been able to resist the demon domain. Fatty Pei, if you have the guts, then do something. I don't believe that the current torturer can watch the previous torturer's disciple get bullied. I'd like to see if you can survive a month after you touch Yu Qianqiu. Sigh. Really, why do I have to remind you that some people are restless and like to look for excitement? The feudal lords fell silent. They realized that everyone was too excited. How could they forget this? Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other speechlessly. The two of them didn't even think of using the demon domain torturers to scare them, because they knew that the current torturers couldn't do anything to them. Who knew that Hu Changshu would come out and make a big show of himself? They didn't expect it to work. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up slightly, and he had a plan in his heart. The expressions on Pei Fong and the other two's faces were complicated. They'd said what they wanted to say, and they'd also taken a stance. Now, they were in a difficult position. However, Pei Fong's skin wasn't just ordinarily thick. He immediately laughed and said, Brother Hu, look at what you're saying. Brother Yu and I hit it off when we were in the cornucopia. Why would I harm him? I'm just afraid that he'll be sad to see Master leave, so I purposely joked with him. Then, he waved his hand at Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu and said, Brother Nongzhu, Brother Yu, don't take it to heart. I was just joking with you. Even O Yangde and Qi Zhoujuan squeezed out a few smiles. It's not without reason that he's fat. He's thick-skinned. Hu Changshu said sarcastically. However, Pei Fong was really thick-skinned, so he didn't care about his sarcasm. He said with a smile, from what Brother Hu said, do you know who the current torturer of the demon domain is? Hu Changshu snorted coldly and didn't answer. In fact, he didn't know who the current torturer of the demon domain was. The reason why he stood out to help Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu now was because he had his own plans. Now that Yin Baikong was dead, and Bing Qingzi believed that Yan Zhuixing was haunted and had a tendency to be independent, he was no different from a loner now. The next target of Pei Fong and the others would definitely be him, so he had to find a way to protect himself. Just when he didn't know what to do, Pei Fong and the other two gave him a chance to get closer to Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu by forsaking their former enmity. He could also see that Nongzhu's cultivation was probably not far from breaking through to the late stage of deity transformation. If he could take this opportunity to form an alliance with Nongzhu, he might be able to pull Wen Lanfeng in. Maybe he could also build a relationship with the demon domain, and then he wouldn't have to be afraid of Fatty Pei and the others. As for whether it would work or not, it was another matter. Even if it didn't work, he had to give it a try. At least, people like Nongzhu valued friendship and would return it when they owed a favor. Ha! Brother Hu is really tight-lipped. Pei Fong smiled to cover up his embarrassment and turned to ask Yu Qianqiu, Brother Yu, may I know who the current torturer of the demon domain is? Don't get me wrong, we just want to know who it is so that we can congratulate him for taking over the demon domain, so that we can call him by his name when we meet. That's all. Damn it. You turn hostile faster than turning a page. Once I say that I'm the new torturer, you'll turn hostile again. Yu Qianqiu sneered, I'd better not say his name, so as not to scare you. You'll naturally know who he is when there's a chance. Pei Fong's expression froze, and he, Ouyang and Qi Zhujuan looked at each other. The three of them racked their brains, but they couldn't think of anyone's name that could scare him except by Changchun. Could it be Wen Lanfeng? It seemed that there was no one in the cultivation world who could make them worry, except for Wen Lanfeng. Could there be a master that they didn't know? Chapter 7:14. After a moment of hesitation, Qi Zhujuan sent a voice transmission to his two companions. I don't know if he's telling the truth. Whether he's telling the truth or not, we can't afford to take that risk. It's easy to find out if he's telling the truth. Let's go to the demon ghost realm and have a look. If it's true, we'll talk about it later. If it's false, we don't have to rush to deal with them. I don't think they can run away now, Pei Fong said. After a while of discussion, the three of them reached an agreement. Patting his belly, Pei Fong laughed at the crowd and said, the new punishment enforcer of the demon ghost domain has been replaced. After sending Bai Changchun away, we should go congratulate the new punishment enforcer for taking over the demon ghost domain. I wonder if everyone would like to go with us. The lords exchanged glances. They had been living together in the cultivation world for so many years, and they all knew what kind of person Pei Fong was. They all knew what he wanted to do. He just wanted to see if the current torture master of the demon ghost realm was easy to bully. If he was easy to bully, Pei Fong and the other two would not go to congratulate him but to send him off. The reason why he wanted to gather everyone was probably because he had the mentality that the law couldn't punish too many people. No matter how powerful the torture master of the demon ghost realm was, it was unlikely that he could kill all the soul formation cultivators in the world. But then again, everyone wanted Pei Fong and the other two to have the ability to send the current torture master off. Without the suppression of the demon ghost realm, everyone's life would be better. Otherwise, no one would feel comfortable with a pair of terrifying eyes staring at them from behind. Even if a fight really broke out, there was someone who stood up for them, and they didn't need to do anything. They could even watch the show. Why not? Someone immediately shouted, yes, it's common sense to say goodbye to the old and welcome the new. We should go to the demon ghost realm to congratulate him. With one person taking the lead, everyone followed. Good, good, good. Pei Fong looked at the crowd with a smile and then cupped his hands to Nongzhu and the others, saying, guys, it's just a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart. We've sent Bai Changchun away. We'll go to the demon ghost realm to congratulate the new torture master. Goodbye. He did not expect Nongzhu and the others to be kind to him. As soon as he finished his words, he flew away with Qi Zhujuan and Ouyang. The lords also bid farewell to Nongzhu and the others. In the blink of an eye, all the lords of the soul formation stage had left, leaving only 3 dead bodies on the sea. The people of the Chinese cultivation world heaved a sigh of relief. They had thought that they were going to face a disaster today. They didn't expect that they would be lucky enough to get through it. After this lesson, they realized that everyone's thinking was simply too naive. Spirit-severing experts simply wouldn't put them in their eyes. Not to mention Bai Changchun, no matter how much Feng Xiangtian shouted, Bai Changchun wouldn't even look him in the eye, let alone talk to him. Everyone was still in shock and didn't dare to stay any longer. Besides, the 2 soul formation stage experts in front of them also didn't take them seriously. If they stayed any longer, who knew what other accidents would happen? Thus, one by one, they carefully excused themselves and quickly left with their tails between their legs. They had come with hope, but in the end, they discovered that everything was just a bubble, and they had to go back and find another way out. Reality was always cruel and could easily destroy all beautiful dreams. Of course, there were people who didn't leave. The flying ritual implement of the Moon Clan didn't move at all. Jade Flower Fairy and the others faced the sea breeze, the corners of their white dresses fluttering in the wind as they looked over quietly. However, Nongju deliberately ignored them. She held the flute with her hands behind her back expressionlessly and looked into the distance. However, the fingertips of her slender fingers that were holding the flute were deeply embedded in the flesh of her palm. Who asked that relationship to leave such a deep scar in the hearts of a man and a woman? They wanted to forget it, but when they thought about it, they realized that it was all hatred. They didn't know that it was because they loved each other so deeply that they were hurt so deeply and hated each other so much. The people of the Sword Clan didn't leave either. The leader of the Sword Clan looked at Nanming Ancestor and Nongju uneasily. He wanted to go up and talk to them, but he realized that they didn't even look at him. Thus, he cupped his hands at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Yu Qianqiu, my clan is very grateful for your help this time. I really don't know how to repay you." In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't only save his clan. If it weren't for Yu Qianqiu's interference, the other soul formation lords wouldn't have let these Huaxia cultivators go at all, not to mention Yan Ji. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly, then looked at Tu Yanfeng and said with a faint smile, "Elder Tu, I've fulfilled my promise back then. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." Tu Yanfeng cupped his hands and thanked him, sweating profusely. The leader of the Sword Clan's expression changed slightly. He squeezed out a smile and wanted to continue their relationship. Unexpectedly, Nongju glared at him coldly and said indifferently, "If you don't scram, you'll die." Immediately, the leader was so scared that he shivered. He threw out his flying magic tool and quickly escaped with a few people. Looking at the group of black dots disappearing in the distant sky, Nanming Ancestor sighed and said, "It's a pity that Bai Changchun left. If he was still here, they wouldn't have dared to do this. A group of fickle villains. None of them are good people. It's useless to be angry." Nongju turned to look at Yu Qianqiu and asked worriedly, "They've all gone to the demon realm. What are you going to do?" Yu Qianqiu turned a deaf ear to her and stared at the surface of the sea with bright eyes. Suddenly, he flew over quickly and landed on the surface of the sea. He drove the waves and searched for a few storage pouches from the corpses of Hua Zongming and the other two. After checking them one by one, he instantly beamed with joy. Ignoring the shocked gazes of the crowd, he directly stuffed the pouches into his arms and flew back. "What did you say just now?" Yu Qianqiu asked, patting the things under his chest. Nongju's face suddenly became long and she roared, "Pei Fong and the others have gone to the demon realm. What are you going to do?" Not to mention the matter of Jasper Flower Fairy, he was upset at the thought that Shuntian Island would be trampled by those people. However, as the current punishment envoy, Yu Qianqiu was still greedy for petty gains. How could he not be angry? Yu Qianqiu looked back at the sky and sneered, "Let them go. There are people on Shuntian Island who can deal with them." He had already thought about it. If he couldn't handle it himself, he would immediately bring Bai Changchun back. He was not afraid of who. Nongju was stunned and asked in surprise, "Who?" Nanming Ancestor also couldn't help asking, "Is it Wen Lanfeng?" Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a smirk and said, "Much more powerful than Wen Lanfeng." It turned out that he was already prepared. No wonder he was not in a hurry. Nongju and Nanming Ancestor looked at each other and asked at the same time, "Who is it?" "You will know when the time comes." Hee hee. I want to give them a surprise. Yu Qianqiu didn't want to be entangled in this topic. He tilted his head and winked at Nanming Ancestor, saying, "Senior Nanming, is this how you treat your guests?" Nanming Ancestor was stunned and looked in the direction he was hinting at. He raised his hand and patted his forehead, saying, "My bad, my bad. I should have left our distinguished guest aside." He raised his hand and invited, "Jasper Flower Fairy, please come to the island and have a chat." Nongju's expression twitched and she stared at Nanming Ancestor with a twisted face. She was really worried that this old guy had some designs on Jasper Flower Fairy, as Yu Qianqiu had said. Although she didn't want to have anything to do with Jasper Flower Fairy now, she didn't want Nanming Ancestor to have any designs on her. Jasper Flower Fairy bowed to Nanming Ancestor and then put away the flying celestial device under her feet. They landed on the island. However, from the moment they landed, Jasper Flower Fairy's eyes were fixed on Nongju's face, while Nongju turned her head indifferently. When Patriarch Nanming saw this scene, he snickered. Yu Qianqiu slowly moved backward. Jasper Flower Fairy, with her beautiful hair in a bun, suddenly said, "Should I call you Mr. Nongju or Xiaoyao?" Nongju didn't look back. She snorted and said, "It doesn't matter what you call me. There is no need to call me anything." Jasper Flower Fairy gritted her teeth and said word by word, "You have been lying to me from the beginning." Nongju suddenly turned back and sneered, "This should be applied to you. At the very least, from the moment we met, I told you my real name, and your name is fake. You didn't even give me a chance to find you again." Jasper Flower Fairy gnashed her teeth. Nongju sneered and said, "What's the point of talking about this now? Then give me back my purple dress." Jasper Flower Fairy suddenly shouted. Her voice was so sharp that it shocked Nanming Ancestor and Yu Qianqiu. She was a great beauty after all, but now she didn't care about her image at all. She seemed to be crazy. Hua Rui, who was at the side, knew the relationship between the two. But the other elder of the Moon Clan was dumbfounded. Although he heard something, he couldn't believe that the leader dared to shout at a soul formation cultivator. Nongju said coldly, "Purple dress. Who is Purple dress? I don't know her. Go find someone you know. Don't come to me. You." Jasper Flower Fairy almost went crazy. She wanted to rush up and fight with Nongju. Luckily, Hua Rui held her back. Jasper Flower Fairy suddenly turned back and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu." She wanted to ask Yu Qianqiu to come out and testify, but Yu Qianqiu didn't see her. Instead, he saw a figure jump into the sea, probably never to show up again. Who else could it be except Yu Qianqiu? When Jasper Flower Fairy mentioned purple dress, he felt something was wrong. He didn't want to get involved in the couple's fight. It was better to run away. Besides, he had something to do and it was not convenient for him to stay here. Jasper Flower Fairy was stunned. Then she turned back and loosened her teeth. She begged, "Mr. Nongju, please give me back my purple dress, please." "Humph." Nongju snorted and said, "Purple dress will never go with you. Anyway, I won't let Purple dress follow the Moon Clan disciples' fate of abandoning their husband and children. Let your women follow the rules of the Moon Clan. Don't drag Purple dress into it. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." He didn't like the Moon Clan disciples who brought their daughters to the clan and abandoned their sons and husbands when they had sons. Chapter 7:15. Don't worry, I won't let Ze join the Moon Clan, nor will I make her follow the rules of the Moon Clan. Give her back to me, I beg you, Goddess Chonghua begged. Nongju said indifferently, Ze doesn't even know who you are. She won't go with you. She also won't like staying with a bunch of women who abandoned their husbands and children. Don't even think about it. These words were like steel needles, stabbing into Chonghua Fairy's heart. She felt like she was struck by lightning and stumbled back a few steps. She asked with a pale face, "You really won't give Ze back to me?" Nongju turned around and faced the raging sea. She said indifferently, "Don't ask any more. Even if you ask me 10,000 times, I won't let Ze go with you. Shameless. Chionghua Fairy said in a trembling voice, if you don't let her go with me, I'll go find her myself. I'll go to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest to find her myself. Why don't you try? Nongzhu suddenly turned around and said word by word, if you dare to go find Ze, I will flatten the Moon Clan and kill your entire family. This is not a difficult thing for me. I mean what I say. Whether you go find Ze or protect your entire Moon Clan, it's up to you. Hua Rui and the other elders' faces turned pale. Hua Rui had thought that her sister and brother-in-law could reconcile and then her brother-in-law could protect the Moon Clan. That would be the best. However, her brother-in-law actually said that he would flatten the Moon Clan. He was very decisive. She said in a trembling voice, brother-in-law, you. Before she could finish, Nongzhu stared at her angrily and shouted, shut up. Your brother-in-law is not here. Your Moon Clan is full of heartless women. Is there a brother-in-law? What a joke. Hua Rui was speechless. Chionghua Fairy sobbed and said, Xiaoyao, you are so cruel. You want to separate us. That's the best way to describe you in the past. Nongzhu glared at him and raised the flute on her back. She said indifferently, if you keep talking, I'll kill two of you right now. Jade Flower Fairy was shocked. There were only two people beside her. Who else could she want to kill? She bit her lip so hard that it bled. She shook her head and looked at Nongzhu in disbelief. She couldn't believe that the gentle and refined man she had fallen in love with at first sight could actually be so cruel. Resolutely, she turned around and said, let's go. A white figure disappeared into the distance. Hua Rui looked at Nongzhu and sighed slightly. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. In the end, she followed another elder and flew into the sky to chase after Viburnum Fairy. The salty and humid sea breeze blew endlessly. The two people on the mountain peak stood there silently. Nanming Old Ancestor tugged at his red beard and looked at Nongzhu, who was deep in thought with her eyes closed, a little embarrassed. After a long time, he asked weakly, Nongzhu, is she Ziyi's mother? Nongzhu closed her eyes and nodded slightly. Nanming Old Ancestor smiled embarrassedly and said, Nongzhu, I'm sorry. I didn't know you two had such a relationship. Don't blame me. It was Yu Qianqiu who instigated me to do it. Damn it, he ran away first. By the way, what's going on between you two? Tell me. It's a long story. Let's talk about it when we have time. Nongzhu opened her eyes and said calmly, I'm worried about the demon domain now. I don't know what Yu Qianqiu is doing. No, I have to go and have a look. As soon as she finished speaking, she had already left quickly. Nanming Old Ancestor said, hey. He wanted to ask who the new torture envoy of the demon domain was, but Nongzhu didn't want to stay a moment longer. Thinking that he was in a bad mood at the moment, she decided to ask him later. Shuntian Island was still windy and sunny. The grass and trees swayed in the wind. In the big house at the center of the island, Yu Qianqiu stood there obediently with his hands behind his back. Lady Mu was really like a virtuous wife as she carefully helped him put on the human skin mask. She didn't know why Yu Qianqiu wanted to wear this thing to change his appearance. Although she had doubts in her heart, after the previous lesson, she knew that she should just do as he said and not ask what she shouldn't ask. If it was something she could know, Mr. would naturally tell her. Compared to the previous one, Mr. was easier to get along with. Unlike the previous one, he didn't even speak to her, let alone act so intimately. He made her tremble with fear all day long and the days were really hard to bear. Now, as long as she didn't break any taboos, life was still very easy. After putting on the human skin mask, Lady Mu walked around Yu Qianqiu and looked around. After confirming that there were no flaws, she smiled and said, "Mister, it's done. It's like you've changed into a different person." As she said this, she took out a clear bronze mirror and showed it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu nodded with satisfaction. Lady Mu put away the bronze mirror and helped Yu Qianqiu take off his outer clothes. Then, she helped him put on a set of gray clothes that Yu Qianqiu had prepared in advance. After changing his clothes, Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged on the ground. Lady Mu loosened his hairband and carefully combed his hair. After straightening his hair, she pulled it all the way to his back and tied it with a silk ribbon around his waist, letting it hang naturally behind him. After everything was done, Yu Qianqiu's appearance had changed completely, and he was completely different from his previous self. He also looked more like a master than before, with a proud and inviolable look. It was just that he seemed to have aged a lot. Lady Mu's eyes were filled with doubt. There was actually someone who didn't like being young and instead pretended to be old. She didn't know what Mr. was trying to do. Yu Qianqiu saw her doubt and swept the clothes on the mat into his storage bag. He smiled and said, "Lady Mu, remember, from now on, I'm not called Yu Qianqiu. I'm called Niu Yud." Niu Yud. Lady Mu was stunned, then she bowed and said, "Lady Mu will remember. When Mr. appears with this appearance, you will be called Niu Yud." Smart. Yu Qianqiu gave her a thumbs up and said with a smile, "In the demon domain, you're the only one who knows this secret. Don't tell anyone else. Give me some fresh fruits." Hearing that she was the only one in the demon domain who knew this secret, a hint of surprise flashed across Lady Mu's face. Then, she quickly brought over a long, short table and placed it in front of Yu Qianqiu with colorful fruits. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and waved them like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Then, he began to enjoy the fruits. Lady Mu consciously knelt behind him and massaged his shoulders with just the right amount of strength. After eating and drinking his fill, he didn't know when he fell asleep. His head was pillowed by a pair of elastic thighs. These days were quite comfortable. When the new morning arrived, the sunlight once again shone on the rolling dark clouds of the demon ghost region. A group of more than 100 people quickly flew above the clouds, forming a powerful aura that directly split the dark clouds below, forming a straight line that quickly extended behind the group of people. After they passed, the dark clouds rolled and closed again. There was nothing unusual, but the demons and ghosts below were frightened by the movement above. They had never seen so many powerful experts come to the demon domain together. After a while, the group of over 100 people finally flew past the endless dark clouds. A mirror-like lake appeared in front of them. It was so big that they couldn't see the edge. Everyone's expression became a little serious. They all knew that this was the famous 1,000-mile lake in the demon domain. The former #1 expert in the world lived on a small island in the middle of the lake. This used to be a forbidden area in the entire cultivation world. Few trespassers could survive. Now that everyone had come together, it was equivalent to breaking the rules here. They didn't know how the new master of Obedient Island would react. Everyone was a little nervous, mainly because they didn't know what kind of person the new torture master was. A black that had already appeared on the surface of the lake far ahead. The three people who were flying at the front exchanged glances and gradually slowed down the speed of the people behind them. They had to restrain themselves before they found out who the new torturer was. Actually, with Pei Fong and the other two's cultivation, they should have arrived long ago. However, in order to come with everyone and increase their sense of security, they had to sacrifice their speed. Obedient Island was like a cat's eye, embedded in the blue and calm surface of the lake. It was quiet and secluded from the rest of the world. However, it was precisely this small island that caused the hundreds of people floating dozens of meters away from the island to feel great psychological pressure. Everyone looked at each other, but no one dared to land on the island first. Finally, everyone's gaze fell on Pei Fong. Pei Fong's expression twitched, but he had no choice. He had to take the lead. Even so, that island still had Bai Changchun's influence, so he didn't dare to trespass. He coughed and said loudly with his fat face shaking, "I heard that a new torture master has been appointed in the demon domain. The lords of the various countries are here to congratulate him." The voice echoed in the sky. While everyone was concentrating on the big house in the center of the island, they heard someone murmuring inside, "Miss Mu, didn't Bai Changchun say that there are rules in the demon ghost territory? Anyone who trespasses can be killed without mercy. Can I go out and kill a few now?" Although the voice wasn't loud, everyone heard it clearly with their cultivation, and they were all shocked. Then, a woman's voice came from inside, "Sir, it's not good for you to kill people right after taking over." There was a woman on Obedient Island. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know that Miss Mu was on Obedient Island. Damn it! Who's outside? Why are you making so much noise so early in the morning? Can't you let me sleep? A loud curse came from inside the house, and then a majestic and terrifying aura surged out of the house, as if it wanted to devour the whole world. In an instant, it shrouded the hundreds of people in the air dozens of meters away. A series of extreme negative emotions such as indifference, despair, and death intertwined to form a terrifying aura. Even the lords of the various countries, including Pei Fong, couldn't help but shiver. They all moved to resist it before they felt better. Everyone's pupils shrank, and a look of horror appeared on their faces. Oh my God! Is such a terrifying aura still human? Chapter 7:16. Before seeing him, his aura had already seized the opportunity. Everyone became nervous. From the tone of this person's voice, he did not seem to be a kind person. Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyang De looked at each other speechlessly. They did not know where Bai Changchun had found such a powerful person to take over as the torture envoy. In any case, it was definitely not Wen Lanfeng, because the aura this person exuded was not Wen Lanfeng's aura at all. At this moment, the terrifying aura suddenly and quickly retracted into the house below. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the door of the big house in the center of the island. They saw a man in gray walking out with his hands behind his back. He squinted at the group of people above and asked indifferently, "Who was shouting here just now?" Judging from the voice, it was the person who had just cursed in the house. Everyone's first reaction was to check this person's cultivation level, but no one could see through it. Therefore, everyone's eyes focused on Pei Fong and the other two, hoping to find some clues from their expressions. However, the three of them were also completely speechless. Everyone was immediately shocked. To be able to make Pei Fong and the other two speechless, this person's cultivation level was obviously higher than theirs. The newly appointed torture master of the demon realm was actually another unfathomable peerless master. How could they live? But who was this person? Why had they never seen him before? Everyone was speechless, their hearts pounding in fear. Yu Qianqiu glanced at everyone expressionlessly and said aggressively, "Are you all mute? Or do you think I'm easier to bully than Bai Changchun?" The gloomy and terrifying aura began to spread from his body again, and it was even more intense, giving people a feeling that he was about to fight. "Niu Yud, he's Niu Yud," someone suddenly said hoarsely in the air. It was none other than the Lord of the Purple Spike Kingdom, Shengguan Taiping. Although the lords present all knew of Niu Yud, none of them had seen him. Even when they were close to each other in the cornucopia, Niu Yud rarely came out, so no one had seen him. Only Shengguan Taiping's disciple, Yulan, had been with Niu Yud for a long time and had reported Niu Yud's general appearance. After seeing this person's appearance, coupled with Niu Yud's signature terrifying aura, he immediately determined that this person was Niu Yud. Most of them had heard about Niu Yud's terrifying aura, and after Shengguan Taiping's reminder, they suddenly realized what was going on, and they were even more shocked. If it was before, They would not have been afraid of him, even if Pei Fong, Ouyang De, and Qi Zhujuan gathered together. Unfortunately, before Yin Bai Kong died, he mentioned that Niu Yud was from the immortal world. The group wanted to cry but had no tears. This Bai Chongchun was too ruthless. Not only did he not want to be the torturer, but he even dragged someone from the celestial world to take over his position. That was too awesome. This fellow was not much better than Bai Chongchun. He had the nickname of a ruthless judge. Just by listening to his nickname, one could tell that he was not a soft-hearted person. Yu Qianqiu was confused. He pointed at Shengwan Taiping and said, "Who's that? How do you know me? I don't think I've ever seen you before." Shengwan Taiping awkwardly cupped his fist and said with an apologetic smile, "My disciple, Yolandu, has served you for some time." "Oh. So you're Yolandu's master." Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding, as if he knew Yolandu. Pei Fong, who was trying his best to shrink his body to make himself less conspicuous, immediately cupped his fist and said with a smile, "So it's Senior Niu who has taken over the position of the demon realm torturer. This is the blessing of the cultivation world. We've come to congratulate you. I hope we didn't disturb you." Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Damn fatty, I can tell that you're the one who was yelling just now. A mere late-stage soul formation cultivator dares to come here and yell. I think you must be tired of living." His words were filled with a murderous aura. Pei Fong was so scared that his heart was trembling. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. "When did I yell? I was just greeting him politely. Don't be unreasonable just because you have a higher cultivation, okay?" However, he could only keep his words to himself. The other party was so unreasonable. If he said it out loud, he would really be tired of living. Hence, he tried his best to put on an amiable smile and waved his hands. "Senior Niu, you've misunderstood us. We're only here to congratulate you on becoming the torturer. We really didn't yell. Perhaps I was too excited to see you just now, so I spoke a little too loudly and disturbed your peace. Please forgive me, Senior. No wonder this damn fatty could live until now." He was really flexible and shameless. Yu Qianqiu glared at him and said indifferently, "I've misunderstood. Is there something wrong with my ears?" No. Pei Fong waved his hands repeatedly. "Senior, you have an immortal body. How could there be something wrong with your ears? I was born with a loud voice. Please forgive me, Senior." Many people looked at Pei Fong with sympathy and pity. This guy had always been reasonable when he met the strong. He had always been unreasonable when he met the weak. Now, he was the one getting his comeuppance. Hearing him say that, Yu Qianqiu's expression softened. He snorted and said, "I knew it. People always praise me for being wise and powerful. How could I have misunderstood them?" Everyone was speechless. This Niu Yud was a fool who liked to listen to flattery. Pei Fong's eyes brightened and the fat on his face trembled. He gestured with his hands and feet as he said passionately, "Senior is not only wise and mighty, you are also a jade tree in the wind, a peerless genius that surpasses the ancients and dazzles the contemporaries." Before he could finish flattering Niu Yud, he could not continue. He saw that Niu Yud was staring at him coldly as if he was looking at a fool. "Damn fatty, do you think I'm as stupid as you? How dare you use such words to fool me? Are you tired of living?" Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice. Pei Fong was immediately dumbfounded. Many of the feudal lords' faces turned red as they tried to hold back their laughter. This Niu Yud was temperamental. He was really hard to please. Pei Fong's shameless act was completely useless. He was probably going to be out of luck today. Just then, a woman in white walked out of the house. She held a fruit platter in her hands. There were fresh fruits of different colors on the platter. The fruit platter was placed in front of Yu Qianqiu. She smiled and said, "Mister, eat some fruits to calm down. There's no need to lower yourself to their level." Everyone took a closer look and realized that she was actually a tree demon. Her appearance was not bad, but she was not stunning. Yu Qianqiu plucked a grape from the fruit platter and tossed it into his mouth. As he chewed, he asked, "Lady Mu, how does Bai Changchun deal with these trespassers?" Everyone was shocked. If they really dealt with them according to Bai Changchun's method, everyone would be out of luck. Hence, everyone looked at Lady Mu with pleading gazes, hoping that she would be merciful. Especially Pei Fong, whose face was filled with anticipation. Lady Mu's beautiful gaze swept across everyone. She smiled at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Mister, there are exceptions to everything. Moreover, these people are here to congratulate Mister on taking over the position of torture envoy. Speaking of which, they have good intentions. There's nothing wrong with that. Why don't you be merciful and let them off this time? If they dare to trespass again, you can deal with them according to the old rules. What do you think?" Everyone immediately looked at Lady Mu with gratitude. Then, they looked at Niu Yud anxiously. "Oh." Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He plucked another grape and tossed it into his mouth. After chewing a few times, he spat out the skin and reached out to touch Lady Mu's fragrant shoulder. His palm slid under her neck. He pinched her chin and asked with a smile, "Why are you siding with an outsider? Have you taken a liking to one of them? Otherwise, why would you speak up for them?" Lady Mu immediately knelt down in fear. Trembling, she said, "Mister, please understand. Lady Mu has never seen them before. How could I have taken a liking to them? Lady Mu is really thinking of Mr. wholeheartedly. If Mr. doesn't believe me, I'm willing to die to prove my sincerity." She was still smiling just a moment ago, but now she was trembling in fear. Everyone who saw this felt a chill run down their spines. From her actions, it could be seen that this Niu Yud was definitely a murderous and temperamental person. Otherwise, this woman wouldn't be so frightened. Many of them wanted to escape. However, no one wanted to take the risk until the last moment. Because no one was confident that they could escape from the hands of this person from the immortal world. The scene of Yin Baikong dying at the hands of the underworld messenger was still fresh in everyone's mind. "Ha! Look at what you're saying. How can I bear to let you die? Get up." Niu Yud personally helped the kneeling Lady Mu up. Then, he tilted his head to look at the crowd and said indifferently, "Today, for the sake of my maidservant, I'll let you off. However, if anyone dares to barge in again, it means that they don't respect me. When that time comes, it'll be useless no matter who begs for mercy." We don't dare. We don't dare." Everyone replied timidly. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that they had passed today. Speaking of which, they really had to thank this tree demon called Lady Mu. Unexpectedly, Niu Yud snorted coldly again and said, "But rules are rules. You have to pay the price for breaking them. Otherwise, how can I maintain my prestige as a torture envoy? If word gets out, won't people laugh at me for being inferior to Bai Changchun?" Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. They didn't know what price he wanted them to pay. They stared nervously at Niu Yud, who lowered his head and pondered. "How about this?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said sinisterly, "According to the number of people, each of you will pay 200 million upper-grade spirit stones. Those who pay can scram. Those who don't, leave your life behind." Then, he said to Lady Mu, "Since you've pleaded for mercy for them, you'll be the one to collect the money. 200 million upper-grade spirit stones per person in exchange for their life." The various feudal lords looked at each other. They recalled Nyo Yud's past of swindling money from the ghost manor. They finally confirmed that this fellow was someone who loved money. Yes. Lady Mu bowed and accepted the order. She rose into the air and flew in front of Pei Fong. She looked at Pei Fong without saying anything. It was as if she was telling him to do as he saw fit. The fat on Pei Fong's face twitched. 200 million upper-grade spirit stones was too much. However, when he saw Nyo Yud staring at him coldly from below, a chill ran down his spine. He immediately squeezed out a smile and took out a storage bag. He offered it with both hands and said, "Thank you, miss. Here are 200 million upper-grade spirit stones. Please take a look." Chapter 717. The price was a little high, but compared to his life, and he could afford it, 200 million high-grade spirit stones was really not a lot. However, he felt very aggrieved. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have come all the way here to pay for humiliation. Wait. Everyone was shocked and looked at the person who spoke. All of them were shocked. At first, they felt the pain of paying such a large sum of money, but now, they were worried that Nyo Yud would go back on his words. Nyo Yud pointed at Pei Fong and said, "He is the leader. He was loud and disturbed my sleep, so he is an exception. I will add another 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Everyone else is the same." He was really overbearing. However, Yu Qianqiu naturally had his own thoughts. Some people. They needed to be taught a lesson, especially these thick-skinned, black-hearted, and sly old foxes. If you pretended that nothing had happened and let them go for nothing, they might suspect that you had a guilty conscience. In the end, they might turn around and repeatedly test you. Towards these people, he had to maintain an appropriate amount of pressure to make them feel fear and pressure, not giving them the chance to think nonsense. He had to put on a high profile and clearly let them understand that he was more powerful than them and could take their lives at any time. The more he pressured them, the more they would be afraid of him. Of course, there had to be a limit to pressuring them. He couldn't force them to do something desperate. Therefore, he chose Pei Fong to make an example out of him. He couldn't pick a pushover at this time. By suppressing the most powerful one, he would naturally scare the others. As for why he wanted each of them to take out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, it was because when Yu Qianqiu was on Xian Island, he found close to 800 million high-grade spirit stones in the storage bags of Hua Zongming and the other two. It seemed that Hua Zongming and the others weren't the most powerful among the feudal lords. If they could carry so much money with them, these people definitely couldn't be any worse. Yu Qianqiu did an average calculation and estimated that each of them could take out 200 million. After all, these people were not ordinary cultivators, but local money bags. Although a mere 1 or 200 million was a huge amount, it was not enough to hurt these local money bags. Therefore, they should be willing to take out their money to save their lives. When Pei Fong heard that he wanted to add another 100 million, his expression became complicated. No matter how rich he was, it wasn't easy money that he picked up from the streets. Asking him to take out another 100 million just like that would be painful. After all, it wasn't 1 or 2 million, but 100 million. People were different. Pei Fong was Pei Fong, not Yin Bai Kong. If it was Yin Bai Kong, he would probably take the initiative to give another 100 million, and he would even find an opportunity to send more money in the future. He wasn't afraid of Nyo Yud asking, he was afraid that Nyo Yud wouldn't accept. Seeing him hesitate, Lady Mu turned to look at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said expressionlessly, "Damn fatty, you're not willing." Pei Fong was startled and smiled awkwardly, I'm willing. Very quickly, he took out another storage pouch and offered it with both hands. He really refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. After Lady Mu finished counting, she went to Qi Zhoujuan who was standing beside him. Chi Jojuan silently took out a storage pouch. Therefore, it was Yangda's turn again. These three standing at the front were naturally the unluckiest. They set an example for the people behind them and took out their money. Yu Qianzhou was secretly delighted. This was a huge amount of wealth. However, on the surface, he said expressionlessly, "Those who paid, scram. Don't wait for me to change my mind and regret it." Needless to say, these three late-stage soul formation cultivators didn't want to stay here anymore. Pei Fong smiled with his bleeding face, cupped his hands and said, "It's my honor to be able to meet Senior Niu today. We will take our leave now. Before you leave, listen carefully. From now on, I will take over by Changchun's matters. If anyone violates the old rules, they won't be as easy to talk to as they did today." Yu Qianzhou waved his sleeve and shouted, "Scram!" The three of them nodded speechlessly. Then, they shot into the sky and quickly flew away. After these three people took out their money and left, the others didn't have any temper. They all prepared their spirit stones in advance and waited for Lady Mu to come and collect the money. Those who paid hurriedly ran away. No one dared to stay. Who knew if this fickle Niu Yud would go back on his words? Therefore, some people even took the initiative to pay first and then quickly leave. There were fewer and fewer people around. Some people were even shocked because they didn't have enough spirit stones with them. They hurriedly found someone to borrow them. If they were too late and everyone left, who could they borrow money from? That could kill people. Not long after, the feudal lords who came with ulterior motives didn't get to see the excitement they were looking forward to. Instead, they were all ruthlessly slaughtered. The most unbearable thing was that they took out their own money and gave it away for free. They even had to say thank you to the woman who collected the money. How could they endure this? As a result, they walked away with their faces covered in grime. When Yu Qianzhou saw that the sky had returned to its tranquil state, he returned to the large house, feeling very pleased with himself. Then, he sat down on the mat. Not long after, he saw Lady Mu come in with a large cloth bag. She placed it in front of him and opened it, immediately revealing a large pile of storage bags. Lady Mu looked at Yu Qianzhou with respect. She really admired him. It turned out that Mr.'s name, Niu Yud, was so famous outside. He could scare so many soul formation experts to this extent. It was obvious how powerful his hidden cultivation was. It was no wonder that he could take over the demon domain. She had always thought that Yu Qianzhou had hidden his profound cultivation, but she didn't know that there was another reason. "You put on a good show today." Yu Qianzhou first praised Lady Mu. Then, he looked at the pile of storage bags and rubbed his hands excitedly. "How many are there in total?" Lady Mu came back to her senses and said with a smile, "There are a total of 133 people. 200 million for each person. Together with the extra 100 million from that fatty, it's a total of 26. 7 billion superior grade spirit stones. Waha!" Yu Qianzhou laughed wildly. He suddenly pounced on the storage bags and gave them a warm hug. He almost burst into tears. "I'm rich. This demon domain torturer is really poor." When Bai Changchun left, he didn't leave a single spirit stone behind. Now, he suddenly became rich. Yu Qianzhou, who was lying on the storage bag, really felt sorry for his master. With his master's ability, he could easily extort 1 billion from each of the countries. A few hundred countries would be hundreds of billions. However, his master was too pure. Otherwise, his successor would be the richest man in the world. What a pity. After the excitement, Yu Qianzhou sat back in his original position. He stared at the pile of storage bags in front of him and shook his head with a sigh. What a pity. Only about 100 out of more than 300 lords came. If all of them were here, we would have made a fortune. Lady Mu chuckled and thought to herself, Sir is too greedy. But it's not bad to have so many. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the storage bags in front of him and said, take one. As the housekeeper of Obedient Island, how can she not have money? Lady Mu was stunned. She knew that it was not good to disobey Yu Qianqiu's words. Hence, she thanked him and took one. Then, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the pile of storage bags in front of him disappeared. They went to the Utopia treasury guarded by Bai Suzhen. At this moment, the sound of someone flying quickly came from the sky. Someone had landed on Obedient Island. Lady Mu did not think much of it because she believed that with Sir's abilities, what couldn't he handle? However, Yu Qianqiu's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He was worried that some of the deity transformation stage lords had noticed something was amiss and had returned to settle the score with him. While he was worrying, a person had already appeared at the door. It was none other than Nongzhu. When Nongzhu saw Yu Qianqiu, she and Yu Qianqiu were stunned at the same time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He wondered why Nongzhu had rushed over. Had the matter with Viburnum Fairy been resolved so quickly? Nongzhu was shocked when she saw Niu Yud. Then, she remembered that Niu Yud was Yu Qianqiu. You. Why are you here? Yu Qianqiu wanted to ask him about the matter with Viburnum Fairy, but he changed his words. Nongzhu's gaze paused on Lady Mu for a moment, and her eyes became a little sharp. Seeing that she was sitting so close to Yu Qianqiu, she seemed a little unhappy. It was not because she was worried that there would be an ambiguous relationship between them, but because when Bai Changchun was here, this woman did not dare to come into the house easily. Did she become unruly after Bai Changchun left? In Nongzhu's subconscious, Obedient Island and this house represented Bai Changchun, and no one could blaspheme them. Lady Mu naturally knew that Nongzhu's status in Obedient Island was not ordinary and she was not an outsider. Being stared at by Yu Qianqiu, she felt a little guilty and hurriedly got up. She bowed to Nongzhu and said, Sir, I'll go out first. She turned around and bowed to Nongzhu, and then walked out quickly. Nongzhu looked back coldly, and then stared at Yu Qianqiu and snorted, Don't lose the dignity of the torture envoy of the demon ghost region. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, I don't have the ability to maintain my dignity. Why don't I pass the position of torture envoy to you now? Don't talk nonsense here. Nongzhu sat next to him angrily. Looking around at the quiet surroundings, she asked suspiciously, Where are Pei Fong and the others? Didn't they come? They came. I just drove them away not long ago. Yu Qianqiu said proudly. You drove them away. Don't talk nonsense. Ah. Nongzhu suddenly came to her senses. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu's face and said, You scared them away with the identity of Niu Yud? How could this work? It doesn't matter what method I used. As long as it can solve the problem, it's a good method. Yu Qianqiu said proudly. He decided to keep the matter of making a fortune a secret for the time being. Otherwise, he was afraid that this old man would blackmail him. Nongzhu thought for a while and nodded slowly, saying, It seems that I worried too much. But this is also good. After the news that Niu Yud has taken over the demon ghost region is spread, at least for a period of time, no one dares to disturb the demon ghost region. I can also make use of this time to seize the opportunity. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, Seize the opportunity for what? Nongzhu was silent for a while and said, I'm going to do closed-door training for a period of time. Chapter 7:18. Yu Qianqiu laughed. His master was right. This old man had finally made up his mind to break through his cultivation. That's not right. Nongzhu suddenly slapped her thigh and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose. With your cultivation, we left Xian Island right after each other. How did you arrive at the demon region before me? There must be something behind this. Tell me honestly. Yu Qianqiu was startled. This was really hard to explain. He did come back before Yu Qianqiu, and not just a little bit earlier. He had already slept soundly on the lap of a beauty. He rubbed his nose and smiled. I've cultivated a magic art for escaping. I'm good at speed. That's why I came back earlier than you. Since he couldn't explain it clearly, he could only use self-deprecation to keep it a secret. Nongzhu looked at him from head to toe. She said doubtfully, no wonder you're so good at escaping. What magic art is it? Tell me. Ha! You'll know when you have the chance. Yu Qianqiu smiled perfunctorily. Seeing that he didn't want to tell her, Nongzhu didn't turn on him. She stood up and stared at him in silence for a while. Then she said slowly, I trust Bai Changchun's judgment. You'll have to rely on yourself from now on. She took out a jade archive and threw it to Yu Qianqiu. I've set up a message formation in the purple bamboo forest. There are coordinates in the jade archive. You can look for me if you need anything. At least, I won't leave the purple bamboo forest for a while. You're going back to the South Sea now. Yu Qianqiu stood up and followed Nongzhu to the door. After stepping out of the door, Nongzhu said with a serious expression, once Bai Changchun leaves, you won't be able to hold on for long. Sooner or later, you'll be exposed. I have to calm down and break through my cultivation to protect myself. If one day, the demon region really. At least the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea can be your home. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, I'm not as pessimistic as you think, am I? Nongzhu didn't want to argue with him, so she raised her hand and said, be careful, I'm leaving. Wait. Yu Qianqiu stopped him and took out 2 storage pouches. These are gifts for Zi and Furong, one for each of them. Nongzhu was startled when she received it. She then injected her divine sense into it to see what it was. After seeing it, she was stunned for a long time, and the muscles on her face twitched. There were 200 million high-grade spirit stones in each of the 2 storage bags. This was the first time he had seen someone give money to a woman as a gift. Moreover, he was very generous, giving 400 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. Nongzhu gradually came to her senses. She gritted her teeth and asked, tell me honestly, how much money do you have? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, it's not a lot, it's just a so-so. It should be enough to spend in this lifetime. If it's not enough, I'll just earn more. Nongzhu was speechless. The so from this money grubber's mouth must be a frighteningly huge amount. It was better not to know, lest she was provoked. He was a rich man. He watched as Yu Qianqiu took out another jade archive and inserted something into it. Then, he took out 2 porcelain bottles and handed them to Miao Yi, saying, one of the bottles contains the limit-breaking pill, and the other contains the 7 treasures pill. There's a method to use it in this jade archive. Help me bring it to Furong. It can help her raise her cultivation level to the early stage of tribulation passing. Nongzhu took it and asked suspiciously, didn't you say that this thing can poison people to death? Why did you give it to Furong? Although he knew that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't harm Furong, he still had doubts and couldn't help asking. There are real and fake pills. Yu Qianqiu explained weakly. Nongzhu suddenly became furious and said, how dare you sell fake pills to harm people? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, which eye of yours saw me sell fake pills? You can't talk nonsense. You, go. Nongzhu was so angry that she flung her sleeve and flew away. Looking at the black dot disappearing into the horizon, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then, he frowned and continued strolling. A cool breeze caressed his face, and the grass was fragrant. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the edge of the 1,000 Miles Lake. Looking at the sparkling surface of the lake, he couldn't help but be startled. His eyes turned, and no one knew what he was thinking. Without hesitation, he jumped into the lake. Splash! Water splashed on the surface of the lake, creating ripples. His figure disappeared from the surface of the lake. Under the water, Yu Qianqiu occasionally spat out a string of bubbles from the corner of his mouth. He dived head first into the bottom of the lake. The water was clear, and schools of fish could be seen swimming in the lake. Some of the bolder fishes even ran over to play around him as he dived, diving down with him. After diving for nearly 100 meters, the light in the water gradually weakened, and it became dark in front of him. The water pressure was getting stronger and stronger. The fish following him didn't seem to be deep-water fish. They all swung their tails and swam back upstream. Yu Qianqiu also felt a little uncomfortable. He pointed his finger downward and began to use the water formula. The surrounding water quickly separated, and his whole body seemed to be wrapped in a bubble, sinking rapidly. The surroundings became darker and darker, so dark that not a single ray of light could be seen. The surroundings were extremely quiet, giving people a terrifying sense of oppression. Yu Qianqiu himself didn't know how deep he had dived. He estimated that it was about 1,000 meters. He felt that using the water formula to repel the water pressure was also getting stronger and stronger. The huge pressure around him kept squeezing, and he gradually felt that he couldn't bear it. It was obvious that with his current cultivation, it would be difficult for him to withstand too much pressure when using the water art. Fortunately, the water formula was miraculous. It could strip the oxygen contained in the water for him to breathe. Otherwise, it would be even more uncomfortable. Just as he was hesitating whether to give up, a faint white light appeared below him. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It seemed that he was not far from the target he wanted to check out. He gritted his teeth, endured the pressure, and dived deeper. The light below grew bigger and bigger, but his face was also flushed red. The pressure was too great, and he couldn't bear it. But he still persisted. When he started to feel dizzy, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to go any further. Looking down, the target was only about 100 meters away from him. Unfortunately, the pressure was too great, and he couldn't get close at all. This was also because he could use the water formula to repel the water. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to reach this position. At the bottom of the tranquil lake lay a serene pearl. Under the backdrop of the darkness, it emitted a gentle white light, illuminating the surrounding topography of the lake. There were rare deep-water fishes leisurely swimming around. Rather than calling it a pearl, it was more like an upside-down bowl. It was white and smooth like jade, but in reality, it was just a light barrier. This light barrier at the bottom of the lake was at least a few hundred meters wide and 100 meters tall. It was in a semicircular arc. From the surrounding topography, it could be seen that this place was originally a valley. The surrounding shadows rose and fell like a mountain range. Not far away, there was a tall, round pillar-like mountain. Yu Qianqiu looked up the pillar-like mountain and was immediately shocked. Judging from the direction, this should be the lowest base of Obedient Island. He felt that it was a little strange. Most mountains were cone-shaped. How could a mountain grow like this? The circumference of the top and bottom was about the same, and it was as straight as a pillar. Furthermore, this height wasn't low. It was at least 2 kilometers, right? Such a scene couldn't help but make people think of the wooden fish and the wooden mallet used to strike it. The light barrier was like a wooden fish, and the pillars supporting Obedient Island was like the wooden mallet used to strike it. How could there be such a strange topography? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. After hesitating for a while, Yu Qianqiu felt like his ears were ringing and the dizziness was getting stronger. The distance between him and the water had already shrunk to less than half a foot. If he stayed any longer, he would be in danger, Yu Qianqiu looked down at the light barrier and shook his head in pity. According to Bai Changchun, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by the immortal emperor and the underworld king, and the light barrier was a seal that the myriad swords demon monarch added later on. In other words, the entrance to the demon realm was sealed by 2 seals. Even with Bai Changchun's cultivation, he couldn't break through the outer layer of the myriad swords demon monarch seal. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to see if he could go in, but he didn't expect that even approaching would be difficult. After working for a while in vain, Yu Qianqiu helplessly disappeared into the water. A big bubble broke into several pieces and floated up. On the mountainside behind the mountain god temple where the leaders of the Green Gang and Hong Gang were hiding, Yu Qianqiu stood in front of the plain and stared at the mountain god temple below. Because of the raging war in Huaxia, Shi Wenguang's army had already reached the vicinity. The common people were in a panic and didn't dare to go out. Thus, the mountain god temple seemed very deserted. Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi stood behind him and reported the recent developments in Huaxia. 1/3 of Huaxia's territory had already been captured by Shi Wenguang's army, and the poor people who had been oppressed by the imperial court for a long time could no longer bear the corvée labor and taxes brought by the war, so they all formed groups and rose up in rebellion. For a time, the uprising of the poor people was like a spark that started a prairie fire, making the precariously dynasty even worse. If there was no strong support, the dynasty would collapse, and defeat would be set in stone. On Wuji Island, the forces of various countries increased the mobilization of manpower, and a large number of cultivators continuously gathered on Wuji Island. In the other countries that were adjacent to Huaxia, there were also a large number of cultivators gathering. Other than the direction of the demon ghost region, they had already surrounded Huaxia. Looking at the movements, the forces of various countries were preparing to launch a large-scale attack on Huaxia's cultivation world. The entire Huaxia's cultivation world was as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All of this was within Yu Qianqiu's expectations. With Bai Changchun gone, the various countries would definitely officially make their move. Master. I heard that our Grand Master is the #1 expert in the world who has already gone to the East Holy Land. Hong Qi's eyes suddenly lit up as he interrupted. Yu Qianqiu made a non-committal "and" sound, and Hong Qi instantly revealed an extremely annoyed expression. It seemed like he was blaming his master for not bringing him to meet his grandmaster, but he did not dare to be presumptuous in front of his master. Gu Qingyun glanced at Hong Qi and continued to report, all the sects in Huaxia are in danger, and they're all worried that the soul formation experts of various countries are about to make their move. Also, there are quite a number of cultivators in our 2 sects, so we should also prepare early to avoid being implicated when the time comes. You're worrying too much. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said, some time ago, the new torture master of the demon ghost region, Niu Yud, already warned them that the soul formation experts of various countries don't dare to come to Huaxia for the time being. Think of a way to spread this news so that the various sects can prepare for war with peace of mind. Don't make it so that they surrender before the fight even starts. Humph. Anyway, they're all tired of living. If there's something wrong with their cultivation, it's better to die a little more. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.